Hi, I'm Katja.
And I'm Ryn.
And we're here at CommonWealth Holistic Herbalism in Boston, Massachusetts.
And on the internet everywhere, thanks to the power, in this case, of YouTube.
And also to the power of Mason over at HerbRally. Mason sent us 20 questions from the HerbRally listeners in celebration of achieving 20,000 subscribers on the HerbRally YouTube channel. Congratulations.
So we're a couple of herbalists. That's pretty much all you need to know.
We are, in fact, a couple of herbalists.
We are indeed,
We are one of the handful of wife and husband teams here in the Herbal community.
Mm-hmm. We've been teaching together for about 15 years. Ladybird here's career extended about 12 years before that. I was lucky to meet her when she was already a practitioner and had a lot of interesting jars in her closet for me to ask about and to get introduced to herbalism. So
ladies, when you want to catch a man, the way is definitely to be an herbalist and have lots of jars of herbs in your closet.
Cool jars, interesting jars with stuff in them. Ah, yes.
Yeah. Definitely the way to get yourself a husband.
Yeah, it definitely works.
It works for me.
So we've been practicing and teaching together for a good long time, and we have a school. It's now online. Has been, I guess, for almost a decade. Whoa.
Yeah, that's kind of
pretty cool.
Yeah.
But that just means that we've got it all figured out. We know what we're doing. We know how to teach people this way. It is proven successful.
That's actually a big thing, though, because it's hard to learn in an online setting. It isn't super easy. Like it's nice to see little bits of things online, but when you're really trying to study online, it's not actually super easy because maybe you feel isolated or you miss the interaction of an in-person experience. And so we have worked really hard to recreate that, even though it's online, to still recreate that so that all day long, if you want to be interacting with other students, you can be, so that there are plenty of times where you can be asking us questions live directly, and making sure that you are having guidance and mentorship right straight through your entire educational experience.
Exactly. Yeah, this is really important to us. We don't want people to feel like they're on their own, or that they kind of like receive material and then they have to go figure it out on their own or something like that. And so we've built all these methods to make it more of a community and get people actually talking to each other. So you can find everything we do at CommonWealthHerbs.com. But for today, what we're going to be doing is answering a bunch of questions.
20 questions.
Yeah. Maybe 26 or something like that. Don't do the math, it's fine.
Yeah, we didn't actually count.
And these actually sorted out into a couple of, or a number of categories. And so we've kind of broken them out that way. We're going to get started in the big picture view. We're going to start with philosophical questions about being an herbalist and what herbalism is and things like that. So this first one came in from Kaden, and they asked, how do you deal with uncertainty as an herbalist? And my immediate response was like endlessly, all the time, and also enthusiastically, because you have to be enthusiastic about uncertainty to be a good herbalist, in my opinion. And you do it with curiosity, right? Because uncertainty isn't bad news. Uncertainty means that there's more information to be gathered before you can proceed.
I think that's the key. Honestly, I think as an herbalist, there is only uncertainty, like literally. There is never certainty. If I ever am in a situation where I am encountering certainty, then I know there's actually a problem.
We don't mean on the level of like bitters stimulate digestive secretions. No. Okay, we can be certain about that, right? We're talking about like more involved, more nuanced questions.
Like when you're working with somebody.
Yeah.
And the reason that this is because everybody is different. And so no matter how many times a very strong infusion of chamomile has helped people with menstrual cramping, you don't know for sure that it's going to help the next person, because their menstrual cramping might be different. What's going on in their body might be different. And so everything that we do is uncertain. Everything that we do is an experiment. Yeah. And so we take all of our education and all of our experience and we direct it at the problem, and we come up with a solution that we think is going to work based on the person that we're working with and the experience and the education that we have. But then we also acknowledge this is an experiment, and we're going to now do the experiment. And if it doesn't work, that's not bad. That's data, which is a theme I think we're going to come back to a few times throughout this.
Yeah.
That's data, and that just means no problem. We just need to make adjustments so that it works right based on the information that we got back.
Right, right. We frame our interventions as experiments. And I mean that both like for myself, if I'm like, oh, I want to try a different herb and see if that, feels similar to fennel or feels similar to ginger in my body when my stomach is upset or whatever. But also when we're sitting down with a client and we're saying, I think that this blend of herbs is going to be helpful for you for these reasons, based on what you've been describing and telling me about, and other information that we've gathered. This is what I think will help, and this is why. This is an experiment. You're going to go and you're going to try this for a while, and you're going to see what kind of results you get. And when something is set up as an experiment, that includes the expectation that some adjustments are going to be made as we go along, right? Sometimes you nail it right away. You're like, okay, you've got this kind of, digestive sluggishness and slowdown. We're going to try something that's primarily based on ginger. We're going to see if that warms you up and gets things moving. And then it does. And you're like, well, that's what I thought would happen. Right? Yeah. But other times, it doesn't work the way you expected. And the way it doesn't work is also information, right? That's just as helpful as the name of the problem or the particular type of discomfort feeling that they get and that they describe to you. The success or failure or partial success or partial failure of whatever you try is more information. And oftentimes that's what helps you get to the answer, like the next experiment is what it really gets you to, right?
Until you find the thing that actually works.
Yeah. So the goal of the work isn't only we're going to solve the problem, we're going to make you feel better. Even if something works, that's also good data, right? That can also tell you what else might be helpful or what else you can try. If, say, there was an herb that was really handy for you and did the trick, but what if it's an expensive herb? What if it's an herb that's hard to come by? What if it's an herb that is available now and then suddenly becomes like more often out of stock at all the herb suppliers, right? Anybody who used to buy violet every month from Mountain Rose 10 years ago probably knows what I'm talking about, right? That's not as easy as it used to be. And so things may change on you, but gathering the data from the experiment helps you to know what you can expect to work next time.
There's one other thing that I want to add here, which is that when we expect uncertainty, when we choose uncertainty as a mode of practice, that protects us and it protects our clients or our community members.
Yes.
Because when we approach a situation with certainty, then we are removing power from the client. We are walking in and saying, this you must do because I said so, because I am certain. And that does not serve the client. Because now they're just doing what we said. Do they know why? What if it didn't work, but they don't feel empowered to tell us that? And whatever else. If we approach every situation with uncertainty and curiosity, not uncertainty like, oh no, I'm scared to do this. Don't think of it that way. It's the curiosity. It is I'm not certain. I think this is going to work and we're going to try it, right? If you approach every situation that way, then you are always on equal footing with the person you're working with. You are in collaboration with that person instead of trying to have authority over that person. And knowing that you are collaborating on an experiment, that you're expecting feedback from them, that you are not just expecting it, but empowering them to give you feedback, to let you know, did they like it? Did they not like it? Did it work, but they didn't like it? That's possible. Yeah. Was something weird happening? When you are approaching everything as an experiment, then they feel free and open to be able to tell you things. Yes. But when you approach something with certainty, then they're going to feel like, oh, I can't, maybe I just did it wrong. I can't.
Maybe they don't talk to you ever again.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, which doesn't serve them, doesn't serve you either. Like we need to get feedback. We need to get follow-up with clients to really know if what we're suggesting even makes a difference.
Yeah.
Right.
So uncertainty, we love it.
Yeah. All right. So this next question is kind of shaped like a specific ask, but it actually brought us into a more philosophical frame of mind. So we're including it in this group here. This one came from Ellen, and she said, how do you deal with constant stress during wartime? And is there a time that there isn't a war going on somewhere in the world that we could tap into by opening up our phone and getting into social media? If there is, it's been a while. And it may just be a question of how long you stare at the scroll or who you've got on there, right? So I think this is a question that kind of struck us, you know, and I'm sure it's feeling pretty close to home for a lot of people. And so that's why I wanted to bring an answer here, right? So on one hand, the answer to this is going to depend to some extent on like how close to the conflict you are. Right? So for somebody who's living in a war zone, somebody who's in an occupied city, somebody who's in a quote unquote contested area out there in the world, right? You do whatever you need to do to get through your day, right? This is not the time to be, what's the word? This is not the time to be like, I have to have purity in my herbal practices. This is not the time to say, I need to only do the exact right things to take care of myself, right?
Like everything must be 100% organic and whatever. It's not time to put pressure on yourself to do everything perfectly.
Yeah. You are in survival mode. You do what you have to do to survive, right? Whatever that looks like, whatever shape that is, right? But for a lot of people who are asking this question, having these feelings, they are relatively safe, right? They are at a remove from the war and from the conflict. But they're faced with news and images of it on this daily basis, right? And so there, one of the most important steps to take is to filter your exposure to those things, right? Media exposure, social media, TV media, whatever form it is that comes to you, right? And so finding ways to take breaks is very helpful. Trying to be like limited in the amount of time you spend in the doom scroll, that can be helpful, right? And I know you've heard all of this before, right? But one other element that we always want to add into this kind of discussion is that if you can find some kind of specific actionable way in which you can contribute or you can support people who need help, do that. And otherwise, step away.
Yeah.
So
wherever you are, even if you're in the war or if you're far from it, you have limited impact. And I mean, that's true even if it wasn't about a war. That's true no matter what, right?
That's true with climate change. That's true. Okay.
Yeah,
lots of
it's
things.
true for everything. But if you're consuming media about it all the time, then the message that you're likely getting is that you have to do everything or you're doing nothing. And like a lot of pressure and guilt that you have to be doing everything or you're doing nothing. And that's a fallacy. It's a fallacy when it's about war. It's a fallacy when it's about other aspects here at home. There are so many things going on all the time that need attention, and you cannot fix them all. You can't even fix many of them. You can fix like maybe one or two in your local area.
Right.
And that isn't bad. Like, humans are society creatures. We're community creatures. We don't always like that, but it's true. We need one another to survive. And so one of the parts of depending on one another is also trusting one another to take part. And so if you feel like you have to do it all, then you're not trusting in your community. And you might have a lot of reasons not to trust your community. That's true. But like sort of to tell yourself or to think about that for yourself, that like you really only can do what you can do. And other people can do what they can do. And when you can think about that, it frees you up to suddenly actually become really powerful. So as long as you are thinking you have to do everything, you're frozen in like a kind of paralysis of there's so much out there and I'm just one person, I can't impact it all, but I have to impact it all. How can I possibly do that?
Right.
When you free yourself from that and you choose one focus, like really one focus, later you can pick two maybe, but like start with one thing and build your effort from there. And at that point, honestly, you don't even really need media anymore. You know what's going on in the world, and your friends will tell you what's going on in the world, and you can say, well, on Wednesdays, I check the news, like whatever. But you're allowed to step away from that. Choose your thing that you want to get really good at and focus all of your attention, all of the extra time that you have, focus on that. And you're here, and that means you like herbalism and you like helping people. So my advice to you would be get really good at herbalism. Not like dabbling good at herbalism, but like really, really get obsessed. Get really good at herbalism. Start with first aid and get super good at that, and then expand from there.
Yeah, and honestly, like, you don't have to be thinking of this as like, what can I do with herbalism to contribute to the people who are getting shot at, right? Maybe that's going to be part of your life, and if it is, I'm sorry, but for most people, it's going to be more like, what can I do with herbal first aid for the psychological and emotional parts of first aid, and for the people I know and I live with in my neighborhood, in my area, my friend group, who are having an acute stressor, an acute freak out, who are feeling a low level dread and looking for something that can help to lift up their spirits a little bit for a little while. That's helping. Yeah. That's helping with the problem. That counts.
And then if you even think about like what we saw happening in Minneapolis. Yep. Like people were afraid to leave their houses, but they had doctor's appointments and they had medical needs and they had also just colds and scraped knees and whatever else happened.
Exactly.
And like that is a place where you don't necessarily know that that's going to happen ahead of time, but that's a place that if you are honing your skills, you really can be helpful. Okay, no, you can't necessarily, fix the fact that somebody needs kidney dialysis, but like I'm not saying that you can take the place of a doctor, because that wouldn't be legal, and it's also not our goal. But there's so much that you can do. The reality is that humans need care. Like we break down all the time. Like we need care, maintenance, repair, all of that stuff. And if you get good at doing this work, you might not even know where the needs are coming from or are going to come from in the future, but the needs are going to come. Hospitals are closing, especially in rural areas, access to healthcare is becoming harder and harder. So many people are losing their insurance. So even if you don't live in Minneapolis or a similar sort of situation, and even if you don't live in a war zone, there are people around you who are going to need care. And you could pick something else to do too. I'm not saying you have to become like a fantastic herbalist so that you can help every person in your community, but you're here, so you might want to do that.
You might want to.
But that's, if you are really taking all of the energy that is being used up by just seeing every possible image, and instead say to yourself, humans will always need care. I am going to take that energy 6 days a week. 1 day a week, I'll check the news, fine. But the other 6 days, I'm going to take that energy and I'm going to devote it to really developing my skills. Then you will be actually taking real action that is going to support your community, support the people around you, support people maybe far away from you and you don't even know, because you don't know what opportunities are going to come up that will need your skills. Yeah. But if you don't develop the skills, then you won't be able to do the work.
Yeah, you'll feel paralyzed, you'll feel stuck, you'll feel uncertain about what to do, and you won't really have a lot of options to pursue for that.
Right.
So, in this regard, one way to focus your efforts, even inside of the context of herbalism, because herbalism is big, would be to say, like, I want to get really good at coping with stress and the different ways that it manifests and the variety of different herbs that we can work with for that, right? We've got nervines, which is a big category with lots of subgroups, right? Like nervine relaxants and nervine sedatives and nervine stimulants are sometimes appropriate, right? So we can learn about each of those in a bunch of more detail, experiment with them in your own body, people you're close to, people you spend time with. So that way you see how it affects you, but also how it affects other people. That can help you to generalize to somebody new that you encounter. And you can absolutely get beyond try some adaptogen, right? Like that might be helpful, but it's more helpful when it's more specific. And we can make a distinction call about, is ashwagandha going to help this person more, or jiaogulan, or ginseng, or tulsi, or what, right? That can be a good place to focus, because that gets at the initial question here: how do you cope with stress? You can teach yourself how to do that better, and then you can share that with other people, right? Yeah.
I think, bringing in that relaxant nervines also is a really good key too, because if you're going to go with this strategy, it's hard to stop the feed of media all the time. And it's hard to allow yourself to do that because you feel like, no, in order to be a responsible person, I have to always be up to date. And so here come those relaxant nervines again, to allow yourself to dedicate that time towards specializing your skills so that you can take action instead of receiving content, right?
I don't know. Could we call out Bethany in particular here?
I was going to say blue vervain.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I guess I was thinking of Bethany, and I do mean Stachys officinalis, or I guess now it's Botanica officinalis again. Okay. But that one rather than the pedicularis. Okay. Because one of its special talents is getting you out of abstract thoughts and worries and putting you into your body and putting you into the moment. Yeah. Which is very helpful for doing the kind of self-training that we're talking about here, and also very, very helpful for people who are caught up in the buzz and are not really living from the heart. Yeah. 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 Vervain?
I'm thinking about vervain. I'm also thinking about sage. I'm like, hey, we could make and then like a little yarrow. That would be a really nice elixir. Yeah. And like, okay, I am kind of saying things that would work really great in my body. So your mileage may vary. These may not be the right herbs for you, but Bethany's actions there, blue vervain's actions to allow you to relax around the things that you can't control, which frees you up to take action in the areas where you can take action. Yeah. And then sage, is there's old writing, like Hippocrates writing around sage and psychosis, but what they meant by psychosis then is not what we mean by psychosis now. And I feel like the old definition of psychosis is really applicable here. Like just everything swirling and spinning and making you feel like you can't find any kind of center. So even though like that's a word that we still have, it's not the same. Like the diagnostic word is not the same as what Hippocrates meant when they were writing about that. So the school of so that's where I'm thinking about sage, and then yarrow, that like really helpful protective aspect of yarrow. So that would be just a little elixir I would probably put together to take every time that I wanted to put the news down and start focusing on studying to allow myself to do that. We just built a brand new course about stress management. It's a shorter course, and it's one in our accessible herbalism series. It's only $25. It's like, I don't know, 12 or 15 hours of video, and lots of different strategies for managing stress, and all four of those herbs play a really big role throughout that course.
Some of our favorites. Yeah. They might become your favorites too. All right. So this next question came in, and Diana asked, what do you envision the herbal community here in the USA will look like or be like in 10 years? And I found this one kind of hard to answer because it's difficult to make predictions, right? I think anybody who's been making any kind of predictions over the past 10 years has probably been frustrated more often than not. Right. But so, if we look back 10 years and say, what were we up to in, 2016?
We were teaching herbalism.
So in some respects, it's not that different, but you can say there has been a pretty noticeable upward shift in like general public interest in herbalism. And that is a longer term trend, right? Like that's been going on much longer than 10 years, 30 years. Like in the US, there's been an increase over time, right? But it kind of hit an inflection point with COVID. And a lot of people were looking for other alternatives. A lot of people were looking for natural options and things to help them to feel safer, to feel protected, and to make sure that they were doing everything that they could, right? Get your vaccine, take your herbal syrup, your elderberry syrup, whatever. Let's do all of it, right? A lot of people were kind of in that mode of, I'll try whatever. Let's do it, And so that was, like I say, like an inflection point and an increase in that popular public interest in herbs and in herbalism. So there's a question for us, like, will that trend continue? Will it level off? Will it plateau? Will it decline? Will there be a backlash against herbalism and natural therapeutics and so on? And that's something that we talk about often and that we worry about a bit, right?
Yeah.
Because not all of this recent or newfound attention on herbalism has been positive. And I do mean positive in two senses here. On the one hand, friendly interest, like people who are curious or excited or like ready to try that. And then also positive in the sense of being intelligent or truthful or wise. Because there are a lot of people who looked at the situation during COVID and said, well, I could sell somebody a purple syrup thing and tell them it was elderberry, and I could find whatever other cheaper berries or dyes I put into there and like make a quick buck. And that too has been a long-standing issue in herbalism and in herbal marketplace and in supplements and all of that, right? But again, it really got pretty significantly exacerbated with COVID. And we're still coping with some of that now.
Which is funny because elderberry would not even be my first choice for helping somebody with COVID, but whatever. I think there was just so much of that going on.
And likewise, it was like, oh, you can take this forsythia extract and it will kill the virus, or you can, whatever it was. There were like many different things that people were promoting as miracle cures and secret hidden knowledge of the plants that was stolen from you by the evil big pharmaceutical companies and like all of that kind of stuff. You know what I'm talking about, right? You've seen it.
It was really like an explosion of scamminess and quackery. And I think that is a really big problem. And I think that we are poised for a turning point, really. Because on one hand, there are, I think more than ever before, a lot of resources for learning really high quality and highly skilled herbalism. Yeah. I think that the desire to be better prepared, more responsible practitioners, more educated, is really growing. And I think that's also critically important because human health is complicated. Like, yes, herbs are accessible ways to manage our health. That's true. But it doesn't mean that taking care of health is simple. And it is worth getting a lot of education and getting really skilled at what you're doing. So on one side, that's happening right now. But then on the other side, also more than ever before, and don't think that it didn't happen in the past. There were so many quacks and scams in the past as well. There have always been quacks and scams about healthcare, not just in the like natural or herbal world, but like throughout all aspects of caring for health, because it's not something that we can fully control. There is always a variable of we've done everything we can and none of it actually worked. And there is also always just the fact that like at some point we are going to die, like that you can't live forever. So no matter what kind of healthcare we look at through history, there have always been scams. There have always been quacks. So that's not unique to herbalism. Okay, but there is a whole lot more of it.
But we're herbalists, so
yeah.
This is where we're going to be, paying attention.
Yeah,
trying to make change.
I do feel like there is a whole lot more of that happening right now, and I think that those two sort of contradictory realities put us at this point where things could go. They could go two ways, right? One is like high quality, highly skilled herbalism, making high quality education available for people, a trend of people choosing high quality education, choosing to take the next step in their education wherever they are, just taking one more step. It doesn't mean that everyone in the world has to be a clinical herbalist, but like people choosing to learn more, dig deeper. If that continues, I think that would be so amazing for herbalism in this country. And I think that would also help overcome the scamminess and the quackism, and it would be fantastic. Yeah,
and a lot of that has to do with herbalism being herbalism and not trying to be other things, right? Like, I think everybody could agree that herbalism is not surgery, right? But a lot of people want to make herbalism into what modern medicine thinks it is, or people think it is, or what it claims to be, right? They want to make herbalism into, if you just find the right herb, then you can cure any disease that anybody has, right? And I do use the restrained words cure and disease there on purpose, because this is how that can be put forward, right? Instead of saying...
That's the claim that people will want to be able to make.
Right. Instead of saying herbalism isn't medicine in the sense of, drugs and surgeries and x-rays and all of that kind of stuff. Herbalism is something else. And it has things that it's really, really good at. And then there are things that herbalism isn't the right modality for, right? Simple example, if I get hit by a car and my femur is poking out of my thigh, then there's not a flower for that, right? We need some of the miracles of modern medicine, right?
Yeah, at that point you'd be really grateful that they figured out how to put pins in and help that bone heal better.
Right.
Yeah.
And in a different example, there can be a genetic disorder for certain people that is always going to be there, and you're not going to find a flower or a root or whatever that has exactly the right chemistry to counterbalance all of the different impacts that has, right? But there are some possibilities from very surprising and strange and fascinating and amazing developments of genetic medicine and things that we can put into people that change their code a little bit, and suddenly things are being changed and cured in ways that were never conceivable before, right? So I think that's cool, right? I'm not against that because it's too sciencey or whatever. I think that could be exciting, but again, that's not going to be the solution for a lot of the chronic illnesses that people are coping with day to day, right? Changes to diet and movement habits and how they sleep, and the way that herbs can enhance and amplify all of that kind of foundational work. That's extremely powerful stuff that can do a lot of really good things. And I'm happy to do those things, and I'm not worried about doing these other things that herbs aren't the right choice for.
No one system has to be everything. No one of us can be everything. And also no one system can be everything for the community, right? We need overlap. We need diversity. We need variation in approach, because everybody's different and every situation is different.
Yeah.
And I think also, when we think about training and we think about pushing ourselves to learn more and to develop our skill, that's historically accurate.
Right.
If we think about, if you are out there dreaming about being the village witch or the village healer or the wise woman on the edge of the woods or whatever, those are on one hand beautiful fantasies. But on the other hand, those come from a place, right? A place of actual tradition. Why? Why do we have these images in our mind? It's not because the pictures don't get handed down for no reason.
Right.
They get handed down because that person was the person who was better than everybody else in the village, right? Everybody else in the village could handle it when scrapes and bruises and a cold and whatever, but when stuff was serious, you went to her. Why? Because she was the best, because she had seen it all, because she had studied more, because whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we have this image of wanting that lifestyle, whatever we think how that would play out in our own lives or in what we want for our lives, then really recognizing that image, what we are seeing with that image is the one who took it further, the one who studied more, who experimented more, who had more experience, who became the expert, wasn't born an expert, became an expert, chose that. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of pursuing skills and skill development is in fact completely congruent with that image of being the wise woman at the edge of the woods, because that is what the image is.
Right. Yeah. And I think this kind of ties into something you were saying earlier as well, right? There's a lot of space for herbalism to be what it is, and to also be included or to be collaborative with other practices like massage and medicine and all of these other types of things. So there, like you're talking about two pathways, right? There could be well-trained herbalists who stay within their scope and help with what they can help with and refer people out when appropriate. Or it could be like more quacky and scammy and like people trying to make a buck and thinking that they know more than they do because the AI bots told them that they know stuff now, right? We could run into a lot of problems that way. But in a similar way, herbalism could continue some progress that has been made in terms of having a place in the context of care for people, right? And to have some doctors understand what herbalism is, and to have some pharmacists out there who have trained, at least for a little while, with some herbalists and can understand the reality of what herb-drug interaction actually looks like and how it's not just matching two items in a database, right? Or who can say, you know what, we do have some drugs that you could try for this, but right now you're actually in a place where there's some wiggle room. So if you talk to this herbalist, this nutritionist, this group of people who are going to try things that are separate from drugs for a while, you've got some run-up time. You could give that a shot, see how that plays out, right? Wouldn't you be happy if some doctors were referring to herbalists in that specific way, right? I would be really happy with that. So I think that there is a lot of possibility for that. But if herbalism is not representing itself well on the public sphere, it's more likely that there's going to be even more disregard or distrust or disdain for herbalism from people in that world, right? So every single one of us can contribute to which path happens. Yeah.
And that collaborative path that you're thinking about is not only possible, but it does happen. Right. It has happened in my practice multiple times, even to the point of like novel drug trials, where this one particular drug trial that I'm thinking of, I had a client who was in a drug trial, and then we collaborated with the oncologists in the trial to intentionally try to design herbal supports that would counteract the side effects of the drug that they were trialing.
Without interfering with the main effect.
Without interfering with the main effect, because the side effects were really fairly severe. Yeah. And the outcome was fantastic and was included in the work. Like, that was not trying to stay under the radar so nobody knows the work I'm doing. That was outright collaboration and intentional and accepted by the medical team. And so these things are happening and are definitely possible. And there are ways where we can all be collaborating together. There are times that collaboration isn't necessary, right? Like, we can take care of something and it's taken care of. It's fine. But there are so many places where collaboration could happen, and that is possible if we present ourselves as people who are worth being on the team. Yeah. Okay. Another thought I had when reading this question about herbalism in the U.S., past 10 years, next 10 years, that kind of thing, there is a really positive trend that we've been seeing continue over the recent years, and it's kind of conference season right now. It's like late spring, early summer, so a lot of herbal conferences are happening or coming up soon. And so I've been thinking about the increasingly diverse representation that you see in conference presenters and journal contributors and authors and speakers and all this kind of thing. Those are some other public faces of herbalism, right? And it's been happening now that the public face of herbalism is less white and less male than it has been for too many decades prior. So that's a positive trend, and one that we would like to see continue. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So our next segment here is about clinical practice. So questions about being a clinical herbalist, sitting down with clients, consulting with them, putting plans together, that kind of thing.
And also like community herbalism as well, like sort of a crossover there. Like, some of these questions are general enough about like working with people, even if you are not like in a professional clinical practice. It would still apply.
Yeah. So Marna wrote in with a kind of a long question that we're not going to read all of, but it was basically about when I'm talking to people and I'm trying to make some suggestions to them, they often kind of give up, or they don't like it at first. It's too bitter. It's not appealing, and they don't want to take it. And Marna is wondering, as a new herbalist on the block, and I'm interested in becoming a clinician, how do I help people comply, right? How does an herbalist get people to take things that are bitter, or spend the time to prepare the tea, or things like that, right? How does an herbalist compel adherence in the setting of being a client and a practitioner together? Okay, so there are a couple of different words that were kind of kicked around in the questioning there, right? So no, we do not compel compliance on the part of our clients. That's like trying to force somebody to do something, or to get them to just do what you said, and we're not too interested in that, right? I do kind of prefer the term adherence. It feels less judgmental to me. It's just basically, did you stick to it? Right? We had a plan, we negotiated, we agreed on it, did you stick to it? And to refer to our earlier talk about experimentation, that is part of the experiment, right? Is like, will they continue on with the thing past 2 days or past 1 day, where they were motivated by your description of what the herbs do and what kind of changes they could expect? How long will that last for them? Right? That's a big part of the experiment.
I like to phrase this as, how do herbalists motivate people to commit to their health, right? How do we motivate people to stick to an experiment long enough to learn how it impacts their body? And then right along with that motivate word is, how do we work creatively and collaboratively to create something that they actually can stick to, right? It's not just motivation. We need to make a plan that's actually accessible in their daily life. So to their finances and their schedule and their energy resources, and also their palate. Like, if it is affordable and doesn't take up too much time and fits in their schedule, but tastes terrible, well, okay, maybe they will say, some people will say, it doesn't matter if it tastes terrible, I will just do it.
Right.
But some people, that's going to be a block for them. So on one hand, it's that motivation, but motivation can't stand by itself. Because if all we're trying to do is motivate, then as soon as it tastes terrible, or as soon as it's too expensive, or as soon as it doesn't fit into the amount of energy they have or the schedule that they have, then all the motivation of speaking in the world is still not going to fix the problem. So it is that creative collaboration, so that as we build the protocol, we're working together with them to make sure that it's going to fit within their budget. It's going to fit within the time that they've got. It's going to taste pretty good to them. And if it doesn't, it's okay, we'll reformulate. All those kinds of things.
And you see how this all implies or requires that there be more than one possible answer to each problem that a person's facing, right? Like, if we had a framework or a concept of herbalism that when somebody has this health problem, we give this herb, or even this is the best herb for that issue, then that kind of gets you blocked in a little bit, or it could, right? If the person doesn't like that herb, if the format that herb is best in, and this is the only real way to take it, is one that they're not going to take. Like, if you're thinking tincture in teaspoon doses every 3 times a day is going to be the best option, but this person can never consume alcohol. That's not the right option for them, right? So, okay, when we're thinking through this, yeah, consistency definitely counts. That is very important. And you can say there's a motto for herbalists. The only herbs that work are the ones that people will take, right? And usually that means that they will take consistently and over a sustained period of time, right? So that's all kind of implied in that. But yeah, if the person finds the herb too bitter to take daily or frequently, that doesn't mean that our only option is to double down and be like, I gotta find a way to get this person to accept the bitter. I gotta convince them. I gotta teach them more. I gotta, I don't know, scorn them if they won't do it. No. Is there a less bitter herb that's palatable, right? It will still help, even if it's not the ideal plant, right? Could we maybe formulate the bitter herb? Could we blend it with something pungent and something sour and something sweet? And now that bitterness isn't so overwhelming, right? But it will still address the issue that's at hand. Or the person who doesn't have the time to make tea, right? A lot of herbalists will be like, come on, it's so easy. I make tea 12 times a day, right? So yeah, it does take time, right? But could we help them to do it more efficiently? And in that case, sometimes it's a matter of not just the herbs, but the tools, So we love to make tea in a nice big press pot. And once you've got it set up right and you have a little filter built into the straw and everything, then it's so handy because you only need to brew it once a day. and now you've got hot tea on demand all day long, right? That's excellent for busy people. That's also excellent for somebody who's sick right now, and they can make tea once in the morning, and if it's ready to go at the push of a lever all day long, that's fantastic for them. But they weren't going to be brewing 12 individual cups of tea today.
Right, like somebody whose energy level is low enough that they can't stand up for like a long period of time, or they can't stand up in the kitchen multiple times a day, so like they have to kind of do it once in the morning while they're still feeling okay, and then like after that it's going to be too much for their body. Well, if you don't make it all at once, then it's not going to happen. Yeah.
So sometimes an approach like that could be what makes the thing achievable for the client, right? Another element here is about their motivation, their enthusiasm, right? So if we start with the things that they're most enthusiastic to try, that sound interesting to them, that they already know taste good to them, like, oh yeah, I've drunk peppermint tea before, that tastes really good. I would do that every day for a while, no problem. Okay, cool, we'll start with that. Even if what I really wanted was some other set of herbs, right? We can start with that. And then as that intervention settles into their habit, then it's easy to add on to the next thing, right? And so this is also a part about how you deploy the plan over time, right? Maybe you sit down and you talk to somebody and you're like, all right, cool. I've got a tea, a foot bath, 2 tinctures, a couple of capsules, a few diet changes. I got an exercise habit for you. If you do all these things, you're going to be feeling amazing. Okay. Maybe they can do 2 of those today, right? And we just pick out the 2 they're most enthusiastic about. We start with those, build them into their daily routine, give them some accountability check after a week or so they can talk to you and be like, all right, I'm really sticking with it. Okay, and now it's been a month and that's become habit. They don't have to think about it anymore, right? It's not requiring that kind of mental energy to sustain. Now we can add something new, right? We're ready to go forward. So some kind of combination here of substitutions, formulation with your herbs, maybe a change in the format or how it's prepared, and that matter of habituation. Right? This is most of the things that we call on when we're trying to help people with adherence.
The bottom line is that people will only do what they want to do. That's all that's ever going to happen, right? That's also all that you do, right?
Yeah.
And so the skill is, how do we get good at helping people want to do the things? And also, sometimes you want to do things, but you cannot because you don't have the resources, whether that's money or energy or spoons, whatever. So we also have to fit it into those boxes. And that is like the biggest part of, I think, our clinical skills course.
Yeah,
and
it really is.
And our clinical mentorship training is, you know, you come into that already with the herbs and all that stuff. But really, for clinical skills, yes, it's learning the flow of a session and learning the whatever, but really it's building this creativity and the confidence in creativity that you feel comfortable with a wide range of ideas, so that you can learn how to sit there and just churn out idea after idea after idea until you get to the one that the person is like, I have the energy for that, I have the money for that, and I feel excited about that. And that is not something that you're born with. That is something that you learn. And so we have so many exercises to train that. And in the live mentorship program for our clinical students, we give them activities every week to train on that, so that you get better and better and better at it. And the faster you get just in doing these exercises, then the faster you are when you're sitting with a client or with a community member who you're trying to help, working in this kind of collaboration. Because we never really want to be prescribing something that they must do. We want to be educating somebody about why something is worth trying, and then coming up together with a format and a mechanism and a like protocol and a timing and a whatever, so that it's going to fit into the resources they have and also be enjoyable. Maybe not enjoyable like an ice cream cone, maybe enjoyable like, I feel excited that I'm taking care of my body, and also this doesn't taste terrible. Like it doesn't have to be cake, but to be building up the rationale and then building up the like actual approach of how we're going to implement that. It really is a matter of practice, and it really is something that you can learn.
So one example of the kinds of exercises and practices that we do to develop that skill is to say, okay, I had a protocol or a set of suggestions that I made to somebody with a particular problem. What if it was somebody completely different from them who had that kind of problem, right? They were talking about heartburn. And for this particular person I was talking to the first time, it was really clear that a lot of it was driven by stress, because it's always worse on the days when they're busiest and when they've got the most going on. And they can even expect it to happen when they're having a stressful day. And so in that case, we focused a lot on nervines and herbs to alter their mental and emotional state and things like that. But for this other person over here, they don't really have a lot of stress. But
like this other imaginary person that you're just experimenting with in your mind to come to build these creative skills.
Yeah. Maybe for them, it seems like it's more a matter of tension, and like they got a lot of cramping and spasms in their belly. And when those are more obvious, then they're also more experiencing heartburn on that same day. And so we're looking at a different type of approach there, right? This is more about like physical relaxation and release, right? And so that might make us think of different plants or changes to the diet to help out with this, things like that. But if you repeat that over and over again, imagine people with different constitutions, people with different habits of how they spend their time, or what kind of work they do, or what kind of things they enjoy versus what they don't like. Then that kind of pushes you to think of, what would I change? What would need to be different for that person, right? This is a way to take one case and turn it into many cases. Right. Right?
Even if you just say, okay, I have one protocol that I came up with for a real person. It was my sister, it was whoever. It doesn't have to be like a clinical setting. And then if the only thing you do is say, the person hated every idea and said no to everything.
There you go.
Nothing else has changed except that they said no to everything. Can I, with all the same parameters that you had to start with, can I build an entirely new protocol that is totally different? Okay, try and do that. All right, now just imagine they hate it. They say no to everything. All right, all the same parameters. Can I build another protocol that would do the same thing but be completely different? How many times can you play that game? Like, can you do it 5 times? Can you do it 10 times? And you don't have to do it in one moment. You can spend a week doing it. You can spend a month doing it. And then, what if I ran out of all those herbs? And now I have only these 10 herbs. Can I still do it? Whatever.
Yeah.
That kind of game is something that anybody can do anytime. But it is a really helpful step in developing these skills. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. So Lynette had a question, which is really about, what do you do when you encounter conflicting information about herbs? How can you really know what to trust? She had an example there about considering including the herb eleuthero in a mixture for somebody, but had run into some information out there, unspecified where or how, right, that indicated that in some cases that said maybe they shouldn't take it with, quote, blood pressure medication, and others that didn't make any notes about drug interactions or contraindications or things like that. But Lynette is wondering, like, what do you do then? How do you know what you can trust? What questions do you ask yourself when coming to a conclusion to work with an herb that might have contrary information out there, right? So the first thought I have on this one is that you got to know your sources of information and how far you can trust them, right? And it's never going to be 100%. No. Like, there is a resource called the Botanical Safety Handbook that we trust quite a lot. Not quite 100%, but closer to that than any other resource.
And it's the second edition.
Second edition, at least, yeah.
It cannot be the first edition. There was a total rewrite, so it has to be the second edition.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons why we like that resource, and why the second edition was so much better than the first, and why we prefer this over other, like, herb-drug interaction manuals or database books or whatever else. Or databases for that matter. We could go into it, but just to say, like, we understand what that resource is and how to work with it, and to the extent that it has some limitations, we know where they are, right?
And it is better than all of the other versions of that kind of work. It is better. It is.
Yeah. But we can always assess the trustworthiness of an information source that we come across, right? And there's helpful rubrics, like if this is a 20-second video on TikTok, then I have piqued my curiosity, but I have not learned anything yet.
Well, on TikTok, it probably is a 3-minute video, but that also is not relevant. Like, do not learn herb-drug interactions from TikTok. Please.
Yeah, right. Who's writing this? What are their interests in doing it? Is this supposed to be a report on a clinical trial, except that it's published by the company that makes the product that was in the trial? Okay, we have some hesitation about taking that all the way to the bank.
Or even is the person that you are hearing this from trustworthy? Recently, somebody showed us someone on social media who was claiming to be a graduate of our clinical program, and they had spent less than 1 hour looking at one of our free courses, and they had done no clinical work with us whatsoever. But they were just out there claiming that they were, and then making all these claims based on that. And people were believing them. And people are probably still believing them, even though this person did not do any of that stuff. And this particular example just came up, so it's on the top of my mind. But there are 10,000 of these examples, right? Anybody can say anything on the internet. So, yeah.
Now, this question was kind of started by a concern about possible herb-drug interactions, and it is good to be cautious about that, right? This is an aspect of herbalism in the modern world that didn't exist for our ancient ancestors, right? Didn't exist even a couple hundred years ago as a thing people had to cope with. Even 100 years ago as a thing you had to cope with every single day of your life as an herbal practitioner, right? But it is now. And so a couple of thoughts on how to navigate information about herb-drug interactions. First of all, expect it to be inconsistent from place to place. There will be resources writing about plants or teaching or talking about plants that never mention drug interactions at all, or more broadly, never mention contraindications at all, or potential downsides or potential adverse effects of herbs, because they do exist, right?
Yeah, just because somebody doesn't mention them does not mean that they are not real.
Right.
It might mean that person just hasn't learned it.
Yeah.
Or it might mean that person was not thinking about that in the moment that they were saying it. Like they were answering a question in one direction, and the contraindication just wasn't in their mind in that moment because it didn't apply to the specific question they were trying to ask. It's not always because somebody just doesn't know something. It might just be because it didn't seem relevant in that moment when they were speaking.
Yeah. But on the other hand, there's also this phenomenon we see where some folks will sort of raise or gesture at contraindications or interaction warnings, kind of as a way to make it seem like they really know what they're talking about, or that they're doing their diligence, but then what they show is not really complete enough to be useful. So if a contraindication is raised, it needs to be specific enough to be helpful to you, right? So if somebody says, well, Eleuthero is contraindicated with blood pressure medication, first thing to ask then is well, what kind of blood pressure medication do you mean? Because at the most simple level, there's some that bring the pressure up and some that bring it down. So which one are you worried about, right? It's unlikely to be all of them. And this is where we need to be considering the action of the drug and the action of the herb and thinking about how they would play with each other, right?
Even within one or the other category, even if somebody was in blood pressure lowering medications. Well, okay, but there are multiple different types with multiple different types of mechanism of action. And so the contraindication may not apply across all of them in the same way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So the more detailed a warning like this is, the more likely it is to be realistic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some of the details that matter a lot include those about dose, right? So dose is a really critical factor in the potential for an herb-drug interaction to play out. It's not just, does this herb interact with this drug? It's at what doses of this herb and the drug does the interaction reach significance, which is to say it will actually matter for your life, right? If that's not addressed either, then the source that's making the claim is a little bit less credible, right? Or maybe a lot less credible. Yeah. Okay.
I think also the bottom line with a question like this, unfortunately, is that it is a lot harder today than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah. And
that is not because 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever, everybody was super smart and didn't make mistakes. Nope. Remember, there have been quacks all the way down. So I don't mean it for that reason. I mean it because 25 years ago, there weren't as many books and there wasn't social media and there weren't as many sources. And so the likelihood that you were in direct contact with a human, like a teacher, was higher. And today there are so many sources of misinformation and slop and just people saying bonkers things because they think it'll make them money, and all of it kind of looks the same.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to tell who is giving good information and who is not. And then keep in mind too that last fall they evaluated all of the herbal and holistic health books on Amazon and found that 82% of them were AI generated, which means the definition of that was there was no author. The author was listed, there was a picture and everything, but it wasn't a real person. The whole thing was just AI generated just to try to sell books. Now listen, there have always been bad herb books. This is not a new thing. But the thing that's new is that there is an overwhelming quantity of bad information. And all of that bad information looks the same in format, in style, as the good information. And so really try to have a human, even if you study online, which is more convenient for so many reasons and for so many people, it's not bad to study online, but just make sure that you have direct and regular access to your teachers, that you can ask them questions immediately, either with your voice in a live session, or we have a thing in our school also where while you're watching a video or working on a lesson or whatever, you can just type in a question and we answer them every night. So you get the answers to those questions really fast. So, whatever way you want to ask your questions is fine, but just make sure that no matter where you're studying, you know, first off, that the person is practicing in a way that you feel is safe and responsible. And then that you can ask them direct questions, because it is so easy to find crappy information out there. And you need to be able to ask somebody, hey, is this real or not? And they need to be able to give you a really good, thorough, justified answer.
Right.
Yeah.
And that needs to include the full context of what it is that's going to be happening in the real world that you're worried about, right? So like, it's not so helpful to be like, do these antihypertensive drugs interact with hawthorn berry, right? But more to say, like, I have this person in mind, they're taking this particular medication at this dose, they've been doing it for this long. If we incorporate hawthorn berry, is there something we need to worry about? And if so, what, right? Mm-hmm. Because the last part, if so, what, is really helpful for you, because there's many cases where the answer is going to be, we're not going to be sure until we try it. But if we're going to try it, we want to know what would bother us or what would be a sign of a problem, right? So if the person takes a drug that lowers their blood pressure and then they take hawthorn as well, will it drop it down even lower? Well, that's easy. We can check for that at home, right? You can take your own blood pressure. You can do it 3 times a day. You can start taking the herb and see if it has an immediate change, or over the next week or over the next 2 weeks, any changes occur. Mm-hmm. And you can be sure about whether it's safe or not, right? And in a lot of cases, if there is an herb-drug interaction that we're a little bit cautious about, but we think it might still be worth giving it a try, there can be some way for us to assess whether a problem is occurring or not, right? That's a really important element of the work. We have a whole course on herb-drug interactions and herb safety. We go into that kind of detail, and not with a sort of like, here is a list of drugs and herbs that interact with each other in bad ways, but more in the sense of, these are the kinds of things you need to ask in order to identify if an interaction is likely, if it's going to play out, how serious it is, and what we can look at to know whether or not that's happening.
There are some herb-drug interactions that are known and also reliable.
Absolutely.
And so, okay, you learn those, that's fine. But the thing is that there are new drugs on the market every day. And not every herb has been tried with every drug. So you could be working with somebody and you could literally be the first person who ever tried that herb drug combination. And so you could be like, okay, this seems safe. I have gone through my checklists of how I would assess if this is a safe idea. But then at some point you have to be like, okay, I think we're safe here and now we're going to try it. And before you say, and now we're going to try it, you also need that list of, and this is what we're watching for so that we know if there is a problem. Right? And so thinking that whole thing through, and again, having somebody to train you in that thought process and experimentation process is I think today really the only way to do that work. You're practicing, you're being mentored by somebody who has been in practice and who has been doing this work. You're understanding that all bodies are different. And so we're going to do all of the diligence that we can. Then we're going to set up an experiment and we're just going to make sure.
Yeah.
And if the person that you're working with doesn't feel comfortable with that, then we're going to pick a different herb, because that's also always an option. There's always another herb.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, so this is kind of leading us into our next big group of questions here, which is about learning herbalism, right? Because we're talking here about things you want to look for in your course of education and practices that can enhance that and so on. But Nicole wrote and asked, what is something a budding herbalist should look for when choosing an herbal school or an herbal education? And boy, do we have thoughts on this. So on our own podcast, the Holistic Herbalism podcast, if you get over there and scroll back to episode 188, we did a whole episode specifically about choosing an online herb school. Because you might have guessed that we have opinions about that too. And so if you want to listen to that whole episode for the entire detail, I encourage you to do so. But here's a set of questions and some thoughts about it, just like an abstraction from that content, right? So first one is, can you ask questions to the teachers and the administrators at that school? Or is it kind of like they're going to dispense knowledge upon you and you have to go do with it what you will?
And, I think it's also important to distinguish between the teachers and the administrators, because some schools you can ask questions, but interns are going to answer them. Or you can ask questions, but you're asking them in a student community and you're just depending on other students to answer them. And you don't know if the other students actually got it right or not. So you need to know for sure. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a student community. That's great, actually, because it's fun to be able to talk to other people who are working on the same material that you're working on. But you need to know that you also have access to the instructors, not just interns, not just admins, not just other students who maybe, hopefully, does anybody know this answer, but that you can actually talk to the teachers themselves to get answers to your questions. Because if you can't get your questions answered, how do you know if you learned it?
Right. Yeah, for sure. One thing that can be really helpful is if there's a free course or some content, some material that's identical to or excerpted from the program you're interested in that you can take first, right? Because herbalists are characters. And we all have our way of teaching and speaking and explaining things and coming up with metaphors and examples and the herbs that we like and that we don't like. And all of these other factors can make a difference in how well we're able to teach you.
Yeah. Everybody is different, and also everybody learns differently. So really making sure that the way that this school teaches appeals to you, the only way to do that is to take a free course. So if there's a program and it's $1,000 or $500 or $3,000 or whatever, do not start there, because that's not safe for your wallet. Instead, start with the free course. If the school does not offer a free course, don't consider the school. That is a huge red flag. Start with the free course and then start with a cheap course. There should be a progression. You should have something inexpensive that you can, a $10 or a $25 course, so that you can continue to make sure that, yes, this is where I belong. And then you can go ahead and say, all right, now I'm ready to enroll in a whole program or whatever.
Yeah. And that includes the way that they teach, like I was saying, in terms of how they present things and so on, but also the way that they teach in terms of how they present the information to you in the form of text or audio files, video, live sessions, like if this is learning online, do I need to be at my computer at the same time and day, like every week for the next 12 months, and that's how I'm learning online? Or is it more like what we do at our school, where the video and the reading lessons and the articles and so on are at your own pace, and then you can come to Q&A sessions twice a week, and you can get the direct interaction time, right? Like, how does that all shake out? What is the teaching method in that sense for you? And does that work for you, right? Yeah. Some people would be very happy with an audio-only course. Others would be like, I'm not going to listen to that, or I'm not going to be able to retain it that way. I got to have stuff I can read or something I can look at, you know?
You know, even in one moment, you might be a person who normally learns really well from watching videos, but then in one moment there's something complicated and you're like, hold on, I really need to see this written down, or whatever. And so, like, it's really good if a school can accommodate multiple like methods of getting the information across. So for us, we teach primarily by video, but every video has a corresponding audio file, because some people want to go for a walk while they learn. Like, that's how they learn best.
And the closed captioning.
Right. And then all the videos are closed captioned, but they're closed captioned by humans, because machines make mistakes. And if the captions are not correct, then if you depend on closed captioning, you can't learn if the caption isn't correct. So we actually caption them by hand, like human done. And then every chapter also has text files that reinforce all the material, and quick guides at the end that go through every single video with bullet points of like every single thing that was in the video, so that you make sure you've got all that information in multiple different modalities, so that if something is really confusing you, you can turn to another place to see it. And then ultimately, of course, you can always ask.
Yeah. Another question worth asking, and again, particularly for online schools, is you're going to get access to some course material, some lessons and so on. How long do you have that access? Is that going to disappear for you on some kind of a countdown timer, right? You pay for this today, you've got 3 months to go through all of it, and then it's you don't have access anymore, right?
Or like you pay for it on a subscription, but when you stop paying the subscription, you lose all of your access.
Right. Yeah. What we like to do is to only have people have to pay for their course once, and then to keep access to it as long as we're on the internet.
Yeah.
That is our plan.
Yeah. All of our courses, and we do have payment plans for some of our courses, but once the payment plan is complete, it is complete. You are done. You are not paying forever. We don't think that subscriptions are the way to go, because what if 5 years from now you forgot something and you want to go back and review, you know? What if something was really important right now and this other thing wasn't very important to you right now, so you didn't really focus on it, but then 2 years from now that becomes important?
Yeah. I
think you need to be able to go back and review that anytime. So we think that's important. That's part of our ethics. It's not necessarily like the most lucrative business model, and a lot of people prefer subscriptions just from a business standpoint. And you might like a subscription too. Maybe there's some information that is like sort of fun while you're working on it, and then you don't really need it anymore. That's fine. Sometimes that's totally appropriate.
Yeah. But
it's just important to decide for yourself what are you going to need to support your learning, and make sure that you have it today and you have it for the future.
Right. You're also going to want to know something about, like, what am I getting myself into here? Right? Like, how many hours is it going to take me to work through all of this? Even an estimate is helpful, both for yourself, like for your planning purposes, but then also if you're interested in pursuing something like the RH designation from the American Herbalists Guild, and you're trying to build up and document your educational time in order to begin your application process for that, then you're probably going to be even more interested in how many academic hours does this course count for, and also how are those calculated?
There is no requirement about how credit hours are calculated. Schools can say anything they want. So first off, it's important for you to know that. And so it's very important for you to ask how that number is calculated. Some schools they literally just hand you a bunch of reading material, and then they just say, oh, I think it'll take you 800 hours to read this material. And then, so they say it's an 800-hour course or whatever. And like every school counts it differently. So you really have to ask how they are counting the hours. In our school, we count the hours that we are speaking. So if we are providing like hours of video, for example, I don't know, the neurological and emotional health course has like 45 hours of video. So, okay, we start off with 45 hours of video, and then we count the things that you must do that you cannot complete the course without. So like there are quizzes and a capstone assignment at the end. And so we have like, we really don't like the idea of like hour inflation. So we try to like not make them big. I sort of just estimate how long does it take me to do this quiz? Okay, I'll count it. Like it might take you longer than it takes me, but I'm going to count it the amount of time it takes me. Because I feel like that is like more honest, or the way that a university would count it.
Right.
And then you would expect, and we explain this on our web pages, you would expect that your study time is in addition to that number of hours, because everybody studies at a different pace and in different ways. So we don't try to guess how you will study and include that in our hour count, but some schools do. So you need to ask, does this include my self-study time, or are you only including the instructional time, or the instructional time plus like exams, because a university would count that, you know?
Right.
And the reason that all of this is important is because on one hand, if you want to apply for the registered herbalist at the AHG, or if you live in a different country and you are applying to your professional organization in your country, the hour count is required. Now, the AHG has a fairly low hour count. In other countries, the count is much higher. So, okay, the first thing you need to know is, can I meet that requirement? But with the AHG in particular, some other countries do this as well, but not all of them. The AHG in particular, you're still going to have to submit an exam. And so even if you have the number of hours, but you're just sliding by and you're counting every podcast episode you ever listened to and like all that other stuff, you might qualify on the hours, but then you might not be able to pass the exam. And so if a school is telling you that it's like however many hours, but they're like making an allocation for self-study and this and that and the other thing, then those hours might get you to the number that you need for the application, but might not give you the education that you need to actually pass the exam. And so you kind of have to, when you're looking at the hours, you have to be thinking about both of those things. The count itself, and also the skills you need to pass the exam, or if you don't intend to become a registered herbalist, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But you still need the skills to do the work that you want to do in the world.
Yeah. And you will want some way to document that once you've completed the thing. And that might take the form of something you might refer to as a certificate, right? That says this is the course material you've been learning about, and this is how much time you've put in to do that. And so then you might go around and say, check it out, I'm certified. Okay, watch out, right? And also watch out when a school says, we will make you a certified herbalist. We will make you a master herbalist in this 3-month program. We will make you a clinical herbalist, TM. Like anything like that where we're putting on this kind of label that says you have done this and now you get your stamp and now you're all set. Be thoughtful about that. Ask some questions, right? Because remember, there is no state or federal licensure or certification for herbalists in the United States. There's no organization that says these herbalists are good, they have done the thing, they have learned the stuff, they are free to go and have extra special powers. That doesn't exist in this country. And so anybody who says that I'm going to make you a licensed herbalist, we should shake our fingers at them and say, you are misleading people. That is not true.
The same is actually true of certified herbalist.
Yeah.
It is not illegal to say that, but it's not legally wise to say it, because if you did ever run into legal problems, then by saying that you are certified, but there is no board that certifies herbalists, then if anything ever went to court, which, I don't want to scare you. That's not common in this country, but if it did, it would be hard to defend you. As a lawyer would say, well, it's hard to defend you because you told your clients that you were certified, but you can't actually be certified because there's no certifying body. And so it makes it look like you were trying to lead your clients to believe you were practicing without a license. And that is the one really big way to get in trouble in the United States, is practicing without a license. So even though certified is not the same as licensed, it's still kind of not a great idea to say that, just in case you ever had the trouble.
Yeah. But it's something that a lot of schools will want to do, or will feel like they have to do in order to get their students to take them seriously, or to compete, or to seem legitimate, or whatever. But I think that this is one of the things that it's on us as herbal educators to educate people who are interested in herbalism about.
On that topic too, there are several scam organizations that say they will make you a doctor of natural medicine, or this or that. And they'll take your money and they will give you a certificate that you can hang on your wall that calls you a doctor of whatever. And they say that they are a licensing board, and they are just taking your money. And they will send you the piece of paper, but that piece of paper will not help you. In fact, if you ever did get into legal trouble, that piece of paper would hurt you. Because that piece of paper, if you had something on your wall that said that you are a board certified doctor of natural health or something like that, from one of these scam boards, then that would actually prove that you were perpetrating a fraud on your clients and practicing medicine without a license, or impersonating a doctor. So herbalists don't tend to go to court in this country. We don't tend to get in trouble because, but if you did, that would seal your doom right there. Plus don't give your money to scammers. All right, a couple of other thoughts on this one. So it's important to have access to your teachers and to have actual access to be able to talk to them, ask them questions, and so on. It's also important to have access to other students, right? To connect to your peers, to learn from them, share experiences, wins and failures, and all kinds of fun stuff, right? And so what kind of student community is available through this school? How does it work? Sometimes it might just be we have a Facebook group and everybody can get in there and we can chat together. And it's totally unmoderated, actually, and people will say whatever they think of for whatever question you ask, right? Other times it's we have, the way we do it is we have an install of a private community on our website connected directly to your student account. It's not like a separate login or whatever. It's not connected to social media, so you don't actually end up scrolling on some other random stuff for 3 hours. It's all focused on herbalism, and we're in there every single day. All of us, our faculty, we're involved, we're active, and we are there to help you learn and connect with each other. And it's moderated, so you can trust the things that are happening there. Moderation matters. It does, actually.
It's not the fun part, but it is a necessary part in order to make sure that people are really learning well.
And also having fun, to make sure that everything is kind and compassionate, and it's not moderation is not the most fun thing, but it is a really important thing to a vibrant community. So we use the Circle platform, which a lot of people are familiar with, but it is a private space that is integrated through our school. You don't need a separate login or anything like that, and it's there for you all the time. And we put challenges in there, and people post these are my experiments I've been doing, or sometimes people post I'm working on this thing, is anybody willing to be a guinea pig with me? And so that you can co-experiment with other students, and all kinds of other fun things, I just came up with this formula and I love it, whatever. But you should have outlet for that in a place where you can trust the answers as well. It matters. All right, and then one last question, and this really would apply to both online schools and then one that you're going to go in person and take some training or that kind of thing too, is
think about how what you're going to learn there is going to fit into your overall education as an herbalist, to your learning spiral, if you want to think about that, right? Because learning herbalism is not one single linear path. Like, you start with dandelion and then you finish with, I don't know, wolfsbane or something like that. Like, that's not the way this works, right? So it might be that you're there to learn some brand new material. It might also be that you're there to get a new view on something that you've learned before, or like something that's just adjacent to it, or is just tangential to some stuff you've already picked up previously, and it's going to expand your horizons in this direction, right? It may be that you get a lot of benefit from seeing the way different teachers teach day one herbalism. I seek that out myself. Like, I'm always curious about somebody's, like, this is for brand new beginners. This is the very first thing I want you to learn when you're learning herbalism. I'm always really interested in that, and I've gained a lot from that over the years. Yeah.
You know, also worth thinking about this is your goals. There are only, besides us, there are 4 other schools in the United States that have clinical mentorship programs with clinical rotations. And all of us have prerequisites, and none of the schools accept transfers directly into clinical mentorship. There are prerequisites that you'll have to do first. And so if you know that you want to be a clinical herbalist and that you want to work in clinic with mentors, then it is worth really checking out the schools that have that program ahead of time, because all of the programs do require prerequisites from that school. So if you started at a school that doesn't have that kind of program, and then you want to transfer to a school that does, you will have to do some prerequisite work. And that actually, like, in our school, all the students who have done this have been grateful for that. Even if when they started, they were like, can I just go straight to mentorship? And we were like, I'm sorry, you can't. Here are all the reasons why, and here's the prerequisites that need to happen. They actually, very, very quickly after starting, they're like, oh, this was such a good idea. This actually needed to happen.
I got a lot out of this. Yeah.
And so, like, so it's not bad to work, even if it feels like it's going to be repetitive or review for you. It probably isn't, because all the teachers teach differently, and everybody practices a little bit differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're trying to go into clinical practice, one of the things you're going to be developing is, how do I explain this herb, this concept, this intervention? How do I explain that to somebody that I'm trying to help? And hearing people teach about that in a variety of ways is going to give you a better capacity to do that as well. Yeah. All right. Next question. What's from Natalie here? What's one of the biggest mistakes that new herbalists do? And then how long does it take herbalists to feel like they actually know what they're doing, in your experience? I love this question. I love both of them, and I love that they fit together, right? So here's some mistakes. 1, trying to learn herbalism only from books and lessons. Trying to learn herbalism entirely within your skull.
Yeah.
Well, I guess your skull has your tongue and your nose in it, so...
Like trying to learn herbalism only in your head.
Only in your brain. Yeah. So you can read a lot of information about plants, and it can be really informative and exciting, and it can open your eyes to new possibilities.
And hopefully you're reading it in one of the books that is not the 82% of books that are AI slop.
Yes, one hopes, yes. But if you never ever taste an herb, then no matter how many times you've read about the effects of bitters to stimulate your digestive secretions, from saliva to stomach acid to bile to pancreatic fluid and all the way through, if you're only reading about that and you've never experienced it, you're missing something.
Yeah.
If you've never experienced what it's like to take a squirt of cayenne tincture onto your tongue, you're missing something, right? And that can make a really big difference in how well you're able to share this knowledge to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, if you are only learning it in your head, then you are completely trusting whoever it is that's teaching you. And if they're wrong, you don't have any way to find that out. So it's important to try it because that's the verification. Okay, now all bodies are different, and it's possible that you can learn something that just doesn't apply to your body. That is true. But that's a little different than, that actually just wasn't even a thing,
Yeah.
Like, you got to try it in your body.
And without having that kind of experience, then when you run into contradictory claims about an herb, you won't have any way to pick a side. It will remain in the fog of unknowing, and you won't be able to navigate out of there again. Yeah.
Plus, if you are only learning in your brain, then you're putting a ton of pressure on your brain to remember every single thing that you learned.
Right, yeah.
But let me tell you, where do you hold the memory of the flavor of an apple? It's not in your brain. It's in your mouth, right? Like, if I ask you, what does watermelon taste like? You know that in your mouth. You don't have to check your brain for that. You don't have to go to your flashcard with the information about what apple tastes like. And so the more that you are trying these things in your body, the more that you are holding the knowledge of herbalism in your guts, in your joints, in your nerve cells, in your whatever, because that's where your experience is. Now, okay, yes, of course, your brain is involved in whatever, but it's different than straight up memorization.
Right.
Yeah.
And directly connected to this is another common mistake, which is to try to create a spreadsheet or a database that's going to have all the herbal info in it, right? And again, the problem is the excessive focus on collecting information and collating it into a legible format without living it, without doing things with that information, without experiencing it yourself and figuring out and finding the places where the statement on paper gets a little fuzzy in the real world, or the places where that does apply and the places where there's exceptions to it, or things that change the way it functions, or things like that, right? So the temptation is, if I have it all written down and I have it all in a database, then I'll be able to go look it up again later. But it's better to have the lived experience, to understand the limits of your own personal lived experience and how that's going to be different for other people. And that will allow you to generalize and also to respond to new and unexpected circumstances.
Did you ever hear the phrase, it's more important to understand the math than to, memorize the math or get the right answer or, whatever? Mm-hmm. And I think that is, I don't know, I think that's kind of an obtuse statement because I think a lot of people don't like math very much. But it is the key here. It is more important for you to understand the system, understand the full context, because if you just memorize every herb, what are you going to do when you find a new herb and there's no book about it? I don't know, right? If you understand herbal actions and you understand how do you determine what the actions of an herb are, and then how do you apply those actions and where are they relevant in the body, if you understand the system, then it's really easy to insert new herbs into the system or to insert new bodies into the system with that break down in different new exciting ways. To
do things with the herb that you have never seen written down.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that nobody's ever done that before, but it's not among the first 10 things that somebody wants to include in their book, and their editor has a certain page count in mind.
Yep.
And other factors like that really go into what's available out there in terms of the information that's accessible to you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Here's another big mistake. I think we've kind of covered it already, but to try to get certified as a master herbalist as soon as possible. That's a mistake. That is a mistake, right? It's a philosophical mistake because learning fast isn't the way to learn deep, and it's a practical mistake because you are going to get frustrated if you just try to cram in as much information as possible. It's also going to lead you to skim reading stuff and believing that you've now learned it, but not taking the time to go and prepare the remedy and make 3 different versions of tincture from that same plant material, or to get 2 different batches of plant material from different suppliers and prepare them in the same way and taste the differences and try to figure out why they're there. All those kinds of experiments that really deepen your knowledge and make it real and persistent and flexible. Okay.
The thing is that our society kind of pressures people to become overnight experts, and you can't do that in herbalism. It cannot be done. So your friends are like asking you these complicated health questions, and you're like, hi, I've only been studying this for a while, and I don't actually know the answer to that question. And so, I think that the corollary to this, or like the parallel to this, is give yourself permission to take a long time. Like, don't put that pressure on yourself, because it will just lead to imposter syndrome. It will just lead to like poor skills. It will lead to you feeling bad about the work that you do. Society is not going to say, oh, it took you 10 years to become an herbalist. Good job. Like, they're going to be like, how come you didn't do it in 1 year? But all the herbalists are going to be like, good job. You gave yourself 10 years. You gave yourself 20 years, whatever. Take permission for yourself. Like, demand that permission, because you deserve however much time it takes you to develop the skills that you want to develop.
Yeah.
And even if the whole world thinks you can be an expert in a weekend or whatever, they're wrong. They're just wrong. And you don't have to put that pressure on yourself.
Right. And you don't have to put the pressure on yourself to get outside of your scope of practice, comfort, capability.
Yeah.
Right? Which is another thing that happens when people are like, I have to be, a full-fledged, complete, herbalist who can do anything as soon as possible. Well, you're not going to be. And then that means that you're going to start finding yourself trying to do things that you're not really ready for or able to do safely or to think through carefully, So we don't like that. That makes us worried.
The wise woman at the edge of the woods, she's not young. She's never young, right? You don't have to learn this fast. It's impossible to learn this fast. So if you feel like you have to, you're literally torturing yourself. Yeah. Don't do that to yourself.
And a really similar thing is to try to do all of the kinds of herbalism at the highest and most professional degree all at once, right? So another common mistake for people starting out with herbalism is like, I'm going to build a clinical practice and an herb shop and a product line and an herb farm, and I'm going to do all of those things in the next year. No, you're not.
You're not going to do all those things at all.
You're not going to do any of those things. Yeah, because those are all really big undertakings that are going to have a multi-year plan to fully grow out. And any one of them is at least a single human's entire focus and energy budget. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes more than one human.
Yeah. I mean, also it's not legal. So there is that. There is that. Yeah. But, there's not a lot of regulation on herbalism, but there is some. And if you want to sell products, you are not actually allowed to do teaching or clinical work. There are maybe some gray areas there with clinical work. But it's, it's the law, it's the regulation. On the other hand, in this case, like, a lot of people think that this is a bummer. Like, they get mad about this regulation. But I think it's hysterically great, because the reality is they made a regulation that just reflects reality. Because actually you cannot do all those things at the professional level. Now, you can certainly grow some herbs. You can certainly, and you should, you can certainly make some medicines. You can certainly, whatever, but like, if you run an herb shop, you can make a bunch of medicines to sell in your herb shop, sure. If you're a clinical herbalist, of course you can make a bunch of medicines and whatever, but like, at a professional level, that is going to burn you out so hard, and then you're not going to be healthy, and also you're going to hate your job, and also you're just not going to be able to maintain it for very long. And like, there's so many examples of that happening. So it's kind of funny that the regulation actually is completely aligned with what's actually healthy in a holistic way for humans, because it doesn't always happen like that. Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't like live on a homestead and farm a bunch of, small scale farm a bunch of herbs and then also be a clinical herbalist. But just don't try to make all of those things a job.
Right.
Because it'll just hurt you. It's too much for one person.
Yeah. So So the other part of Natalie's question there was, how long does it take herbalists to feel like they actually know what they're doing? And it's a good thought, right? Does anybody feel like they know what they're doing? Well, not 100% of the time, right?
I think that's where #adulting comes in.
It's also where the uncertainty discussion comes in. Like, I can go into a consult and I can say, like, I know what I'm doing because I know how to navigate uncertainty, right? Which is different from, I am completely familiar with all of the medical diagnoses and rare diseases that this person says that they've got in their history.
Right.
Those are two different things. Yeah.
I think the number one thing that every single mentorship student says when they really start working in clinic, and they start working in clinic after several years learning all the beginning and intermediate material, right? The thing that happens for every single student is they say, oh my God, I really don't know anything at all. But not in a despairing way. Like, it's almost like a rite of passage because it literally happens to every single one. And so we'll be in roundtable and somebody will be like, and this is when I realized I actually don't know anything, you know? and again, they're not realizing that in like, what have I been doing with my life? I don't know anything. I'm so depressed.
No.
Right? They're realizing it in that way of like, everything that you studied to get to this point was just the vocabulary. It was just the beginning. And then now we're going to write poetry, you know, but like metaphorically, right? And so it's like a whole new world when you start working with people and you really start seeing that every single person is totally different. And knowing all the herbs is one thing, but like, oh boy, now how am I going to present that to this person? And how am I going to like make it fit for them? And how am I going to like engage them? And this person's really quiet and shy and I want them to collaborate. And how do I draw them out? And like, you know, all these places where now it is about sharing it with somebody in a way that's going to be profound and change their lives. Whew, that's hard stuff. And so when students say this, every time I feel like it's a huge party. I'm like, yeah, you're in the club, you know? But the thing is that they also seem to feel that way too. Kind of like when you get to a certain level, you just give up all those ideas around certainty and around knowing things, and you just realize that every single situation is different. And there's something freeing about that. Back to that idea of uncertainty. Like, there is something freeing about realizing that you're not actually certain. And that doesn't actually impair your ability to do the work. In fact, it invites the people you're working with closer into collaboration with you. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can always say, you know, I need to look that up, or I need to talk to my mentor about that, or whatever. And then other things you'll be like, well, I have 6 ideas in my head. I'm just not certain which one is going to work for you. Oh, okay. Well, that's an invitation to collaboration, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, Paul Bergner taught some classes at some herbal conferences, and they were titled How to Become a Master Herbalist in 30 Years or More. And that one, I'm pretty sure everybody who's ever heard that, it really sticks with you, and definitely true for me, for us. You know.
Yeah, I think I want that as a poster on the wall. We've never done it, but
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just basically saying, you're not going to do this fast. You don't want to try, but slow and steady practices like opening up a Materia Medica book every day, tasting several herbs every day, doing like blind experiments so that you like develop your senses and your capacity, doing formulation experiences like we were talking about before, or ways to reimagine a case and multiply the experience you get from it each time. These kind of things are what helps you to get to that place of confidence within uncertainty. Right? That's what we like. That's what we like.
I think it's like, that's a really different kind of confidence than beginner's confidence, you know, where you're fresh out of taking your exam for community herbalist or intermediate herbalist or whatever. And you're like, I know stuff, I'm ready. And like, that kind of confidence is really different than the confidence in uncertainty, because that first kind of confidence is where we always have to remind students, like, hey, listen, you're going to be sitting with a client and everything is going to fly out of your head, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're not a good herbalist. It just means that right now everything flew out of your head. It'll come back, don't worry. And like, the first time that happens to a beginning herbalist, or like you just passed the exam and you're like beginning to move forward in your, then it like shakes you.
Yeah.
And now people are talking about imposter syndrome. It's like, no, you're just coming into this place of learning to practice in uncertainty, and that's a different experience. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Good. Next. So France asked, frequently people don't think that they're going to like to drink a hot tea. Can any tea be served iced? Yeah, anything can be served cold, but sometimes this does change the actions that you're going to get from your herbs, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think probably the most standout example there is about mint family plants, like for instance sage and other plants that are in the mint family. They tend to have a diaphoretic activity when you take them hot, opening up the pores, making it easier to sweat or to eliminate things through your skin, right? And yet that same herb, same tea, let it get cold and drink it, and now it's got a more pronounced diuretic activity, right? And so there can be a shift in what kind of effect you get or what is most emphasized depending on how it's taken, right? And we could broaden that as well. We could be like, all right, we're talking here about tea. There can be some differences between different ways of making tea, short versus a long infusion, decoction versus infusion, things like that. And then there can also be differences in effect between, infusion versus tincture versus just taking the powder and stirring it in water and drinking it down, or other ways that you might take your herb. Yeah. So herbs are very flexible. This is one of the beneficial things about them. It's one of the things to cultivate for yourself so that you can convey that to other people and be like, okay, so you don't want to take that as tea, but guess what? Here's your list of options. It says longer than your arm, right? That's really valuable for that flexibility we've been talking about. Yeah. Okay.
All right, Jude had a question. I'm curious about using heirlooms versus hybrids in medicine making. Is the medicine and energy from hybrids the same as in heirlooms, weaker, stronger, etc.? Yeah.
It's an interesting one, right? But there's a sort of a trick in the question. So the trouble with the question there is the assumption that the plant has one medicine or one energy or even one action, right? Yeah. So we could imagine some varietal of an herb that is less bitter and more aromatic than the progenitor version or the official version of the plant, right? Or we could just talk about goldenrod.
Yeah, like all the different various species of goldenrod, they're all goldenrod, but they all have different percentages of aromatic constituents versus bitter constituents versus, all the different it's like if they're all on a soundboard and you're sliding up the values up and down.
Right.
And so then it's like, well, okay, you might prefer, like I do, the different species of goldenrod that have much more aromatic and aromatic constituents and fewer bitter constituents. And then, like I do, you might choose to harvest only the flowers or primarily the flowers and not too many leaves because you really are trying to focus in on those aromatic qualities, and the bitter constituents are not as valuable to you in the particular work that you're trying to do right now.
Yeah. So what are we doing with our goldenrod, right? And if it's the one that's really aromatic and not so bitter, well, that's going to be kind of more effective for us if our goal is the kind of circulation and relaxation effects that the aromatics convey. But it's going to be less effective, it's going to be weaker medicine if our goal was, I want something bitter to stimulate digestive secretions. So it's not just about what is the herb, it's what are you trying to accomplish with the herb.
Yeah, because if you were like, okay, goldenrod is the only herb I have to do all the work I have to do in the world. Okay, well, you're going to gather the leaves, which are concentrating the bitter constituents, and okay, well, you're going to work with those whenever you need the bitter action. And then if you need that aromatic action, then you're going to work with the flowers. And it's like the whole rainbow taste the rainbow right there.
And it's plant parts. It's also like you're saying, which species, and they can be growing right next to each other. So you're kind of out there, you're like, all right, I'm harvesting goldenrod. I'm going to sample this one. You're really bitter. I sample this one over here. You're really aromatic. This is what I want to gather today. Because that's the purpose I have in mind. Right.
So really, so another example of this is calendula. So when you're out getting calendula at like the garden center or whatever, if you buy the roughly ornamental calendula, which is usually referred to as marigold, that's not going to have a ton of medicinal action because it has been hybridized to focus on the ruffliness of those petals. Whereas if you get one of the resinous species of calendula, then if what you're looking for is that resiny action, then that's the plant that you want for that. If you're working with lobelia, not all of the lobelias have that action that is so like immediately relaxant on smooth muscle and like helpful for anaphylaxis or asthma attacks or whatever in an emergency.
Yeah.
If you were in a place where you didn't have access to an EpiPen or a rescue inhaler, or if that just wasn't an option for you. But not all the lobelias have that. Not all the wild lobelias have it, and the ornamental lobelias don't have it, right? So it's like in this case, it's not even, or in the goldenrod also, it's not even necessarily a matter of hybridization or heirloom, right? These are both words that imply human intervention.
Right.
But it's not even necessarily that. It's literally just even different wild species have different sets of actions.
Right. And I mean, peppermint exists. Peppermint is a hybrid. Peppermint is pretty good medicine, right? But peppermint isn't exactly the same as spearmint, and there's sometimes when we really prefer spearmint that has the action or the effect that we're looking for. So there's never going to be we always prefer the heirloom. We never want a hybrid or something like that. And this kind of we can also extend into like if there's an official species of something, does a closely related species do what it does? Often, like if you think of Polygonatum biflorum versus Polygonatum odoratum, right? So two varieties of Solomon seal. The biflorum is kind of like, at least in Western herbalism, is the official species. It's the one you're going to work with for your inflamed and dry joints and all of that kind of stuff. Can we work with odoratum? Will it do the job, right? And the answer is to an extent, right? And you have to assess the extent each time pretty much, right? So you try it out, you see, okay, it has this similar type of effect, maybe not quite as potent, maybe a dose adjustment is all that's required, right? Or some formulation is gonna get this to really be in the place that I want it to be.
But then we're even talking about environment and growing conditions and stuff, because honestly, even if you look at one plant and one specific species, that can vary from location to location, from season to season, based on the weather, based on like, was it really rainy that year? Okay, well, the volatile oil concentration isn't going to be nearly as high.
Yep.
And so like really every batch of herb that you either cultivate or purchase, it's never going to be exactly the same. So you always have to like make these fine adjustments, make the assessment for yourself about the qualities that the medicine that resulted from that batch has, and then take that information into account when you're creating dosing information.
And the more you train your senses, the better you're able to do that, right? And the more you connect your sensory impressions to the actions of the plant, right? Wow, this batch of goldenrod is really, really aromatic. I'm expecting better relaxant effect from it in comparison to the one that's not aromatic at all. Yeah, that kind of thing. All right. So Amy asks, does putting in... Okay, you've heard me do this a couple times, where the person wrote use or using, and then I substitute something else for it, because we don't like to use our plant friends. We like to work with them, okay? We like to include them in things. That's where the little... Use
is a word of, you don't use your friends to help you do the dishes. You ask your friends to help you do the dishes, or you work with your friends on a project or whatever, and it's a little pedantic on one side, sure.
We admit it.
But on the other side, like, humans have an exploitive relationship with nature. That, well, not all humans, but our particular kinds of humans speaking English, and other westernized languages, and probably other places too, but I'm just going to speak for us. We have, as a society, an exploitive relationship with nature. And so being a little bit pedantic about changing a word and like making ourselves constantly be shifting into verbs that we would say when we're referring to humans to refer to plants is just like a reminder of trying to pull ourselves out of that exploitive relationship with the world around us and to put ourselves in a community relationship with the herbs and all of nature.
All right.
Yeah.
This sidebar brought to you by animism. So including instead of using. Does including more plant material when making tea create a more potent brew? Or can it be more effective to create a lighter mug of tea in some instances? Does more plant material always equal a more helpful brew when it comes to tea? So on the one hand, more plant matter makes a more potent tea up to a point. And that point is the saturation point, right? Because at some point, the water can't pull any more chemistry out of the plants, any more minerals and salts and electrolytes and phytonutrients and chlorophyll and all of the other fun stuff that we know is in there. At some point, the water has pulled out all of it, all that it can. And having more plant material in there after that point is just wasting your stuff. And this is one reason why we encourage you to brew everything twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that concept seems a little weird, but you have ever made sugar syrup, like just a simple syrup, and if you haven't, it's really easy to find a recipe and go ahead and make it. But what happens is that you add in the sugar and you're stirring and you're stirring, and the goal is to add in as much sugar as you can so that the syrup is still liquid but is like as sugary as possible. But then if you add more, it will not dissolve. It will just sit at the bottom of the pot or the jar or the whatever you've got, and it will never dissolve into the syrup, because at some point the water simply cannot hold any more sugar. Mm-hmm. So this experiment is easy to do with sugar because you can see it at the bottom not absorbing into the... It's harder to see that with herbs. And you might think, oh, well, sometimes I make a tincture and there's stuff at the bottom. That's more about solubility. Like those particles just aren't soluble in alcohol or in water or whatever the particular particle is that we're talking about.
Right.
It's a lot harder to see, like, okay, well, I put in this much herb and the water absorbed this much of it, but some amount is still in the plant. Well, it's hard to see that. So if this concept is hard, then try it with sugar and be like, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is about potency, right? Like we can add more plant material per amount of water that we've got, or alcohol if we're doing a tincture, and we can get a stronger preparation up to that saturation point. Okay. But as for more helpful, that's different from more potent. Mm-hmm. It's a different story. The strongest possible remedy is not always the most helpful one or the best one. And this does go back to intent. What are we trying to accomplish, right? So one example here with chamomile. If your goal is something that is aromatic, lightly sweet, and it's going to help me just gently relax my mind, then a short infusion of chamomile will do the trick, right? It'll be light, it'll be sweet, have a lot of smell. You'll feel like, this is wonderful, right? Good.
Especially if you're making it for a kiddo who maybe doesn't want the bitter version, like this will still do the job.
Yeah. But if you're like, I have some really serious gut spasms right now, or menstrual cramps or that kind of thing, then you're going to need a strong, long infusion. You're going to take a jar. You're going to fill it halfway full with chamomile flowers or more. You're going to pour on the boiling water, right? You're going to close it up super tight so none of your aromatics escape. You're going to let it infuse for at least 30 minutes. And it's not going to be like a straw-colored drink at that point. It's going to be dark, right? Hopefully you can't even see through your quart-sized mason jar. That's when you're really happy. You drink that down, it tastes pretty bitter, right?
Yeah.
But it's also way more effective at reducing those spasms, right? And so there's plenty of people out there who are like, yeah, I tried chamomile tea for my menstrual cramps and it didn't help, because they took 1 tea bag and they put it in sort of boiling water for 2 minutes. And that's not the same thing as serious chamomile.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, okay, but you filled that jar halfway full of chamomile and you made your 1 thing of tea with it. Well, don't stop there. Don't throw that away yet. Well, compost it if you can. But don't stop there, because you can fill it again. Some amount is still left in the mark, in the chamomile that's in the jar. And when you really want to make something super strong, there's not a problem with just throwing tons of herb at it, because then you're like, okay, it's going to absorb everything it can possibly absorb. But if then you immediately compost those herbs, you'll end up wasting, because there is still stuff left in there. So go ahead and brew it again, and maybe this time let it sit longer, so that you really get everything out that's still in there to get out. And in some cases, you can brew herbs 3 times, especially if you're working with roots. You can brew it more than that.
Fungal material, chaga.
Fungal material is mushrooms, y'all. Mushrooms.
Sorry. Delicious fungal material. we all love that. No, but if you're working with chaga, you have many reasons to want to get everything in there that you can. Many reasons to boil it over and over and over again until the water is no longer coming out dark. Yeah.
Or even when it's just coming out colored but not dark, you're still getting stuff out of it. And when it's something like chaga, where that is at risk, and it is so costly, and it should be because it's at risk, then I'm gonna keep brewing it even when it's pale. If color is coming out, I am still gonna go ahead and drink that, because I want every last thing out of it, to make sure that I'm not wasting anything.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So next, this one says, as an 80-year-old living on a limited income, I cannot afford to buy a large number of jars and containers. Is there a place or a company where I can purchase what I need and not, for example, have to buy a whole case of amber dropper bottles or jars, etc.? And this one signed off, thank you, Ms. Poinsettia. And my first question was, can we call you Ms. Quetzalcoatl instead? All right, if you know, you know. So, simple answer here, actually. You can definitely find singleton dropper bottles and mason jars and so on at a grocery store, or even at like a hardware store for the mason jars, that kind of thing. So absolutely, you don't have to buy a whole case at a time. And
Mountain Rose Herbs also sells them 1 jar at a time. Or 1 dropper bottle or whatever.
Yeah.
But also, you don't need dropper bottles. Like you'll see dropper bottles out in the world, and if you purchase one, then wash it and reuse it.
Now you got it, yeah.
But you can put your tinctures in any jar you have and just use a spoon. It's totally fine. So don't feel like you have to have like a certain kind of equipment to be an herbalist. If you like, it is literally about getting the job done. And the whole thing with the dropper bottles, like those weren't always in use. Those became the thing because homeopathy used them and they were available. But before that, herbal like tinctures or syrups or whatever often were in like 8-ounce bottles that like the Boston Round bottles, with just the flat cap on top, and were taken with a spoon. So like if we think back through time, and then before that they were, your syrup was stored in whatever anybody had. So definitely work with what you have. Don't think that in order to be an herbalist you need a whole bunch of expensive equipment or whatever else. Over time you will accumulate things, but don't go out and like spend tons of money on that now. Yeah. If you get a nice little set of pipe cleaners, then you can clean out the vial, the tubes and the bulbs and everything from tincture bottles that you purchase, and you can work with those again.
You will learn how to scrape labels off in your career as an herbalist. It's a necessary skill.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Working with recycled materials, repurposed materials is really good. Plenty of herbalists are out there putting their tinctures into pickle jars and other stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay. So, next one. Laura says, I drink a nourishing infusion of nettle and oat straw every day for the calcium, mostly. It's doing a great job at keeping my calcium levels good, but is it possible that taking this for years could overload me with iron? I am postmenopausal, so it's not like I'm losing any iron once a month. Okay, so it's unlikely. I don't think you should worry about this because on the one hand, the amount of iron that you do get from your nettle and oat straw infusion is actually fairly small. But maybe even more important, the form of iron that you get from these herbs and really from all plant foods is less easily absorbed than the form of iron that's found in meat. That's called heme iron. And the difference in how much you absorb heme iron from animal foods and plant sources of iron is really enormous. It's very, very enormous. Yeah. So it's extremely difficult for anybody to overload themselves with iron from plant sources. I wouldn't worry about it at all.
As a side note, hot take, are you ready? Oat straw in that blend, it's just diluting the blend. Oat straw has no nutritive value, and I know that there are people out there screaming at their computers right now or wherever you watch YouTube.
Don't drive off the road.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah, oat straw, it is just a big marketing play, and I know that there are lots of teachers out there who are like, make your oat straw lung infusion and everything else. I'm sorry to tell you, it's just a marketing hoax. If grazing animals eat oat straw, they get sick from malnourishment. And there's like all kinds of papers written by like agricultural experts about this. So another way of thinking about this is straw it's chaff. It is only useful for like putting in as like mulch. That's why it's called strawberries, because they use the straw to mulch the strawberry beds. Hay is something that is nutritive, and it is not made indiscriminately out of like whatever grass happens to be growing. There are species of grass that are good for hay, and species of grass and other plants that are not nutritive. But straw specifically has no nutritive value. So if you are really enjoying this infusion, then my recommendation would be to swap that oat straw out for something like dandelion or red clover blossoms, or tulsi or peppermint. Or if you want a little bit of moistening action, put linden in there. You will get so much more good stuff, and you won't just be diluting your infusion with a marketing thing.
All right. Milana asked, being a newbie in herbalism, I'd like to know the efficacy of tinctures that are made with alcohol versus those that are made with glycerin. In our household, we don't consume alcohol, and I feel as if I shouldn't bother making the glycerin tinctures, glycerates, because they won't be effective. Okay, so the main thing I want to get across here is that there's a significant difference between some preparations that might go under the same name. Glycerate or non-alcohol tincture or non-alcohol fluid extract or whatever, right? So if we take on the one hand what I'm going to call a homemade basic glycerate, this is where you take herbal material, you put it in a jar, you pour glycerin on it or a mixture of glycerin and water, and you leave it in the jar to infuse through maceration. You might apply heat to it. There might be some other tricks that you do, but that's like the basic preparation that you'd be doing, okay? So that's one hand. The other hand would be, we'll call this a store-bought alcohol-free liquid extract, okay? Because there what you start with, herbal material macerated in alcohol, or maybe in some cases some other liquid solvent, right? But let's go with alcohol. You prepare a tincture, then you strain that out, you evaporate away the alcohol and like replace that with glycerin or a glycerin water blend, right?
You cannot do that at home. that requires special machinery. And so anytime that anybody says evaporate off the alcohol, then like the whole internet is like, and this is how you do it at home. You cannot do it at home. It requires special machinery. Yeah.
Essentially what you're doing with this is you're using the alcohol to do the extraction, and then you're suspending those extractives, the stuff that has been extracted, you're suspending those in the glycerin, rather than using the glycerin to extract from the beginning. So it makes a big difference, right? The homemade version, the basic maceration version, is just not as potent as a tincture in almost all circumstances, right? Same herb, same amount of liquid, whatever, not going to be comparable in terms of potency. A room temperature passive maceration like that is especially weak.
Yeah, that is just outright a waste of material. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But even if you amp it up with heat and other things, it still just isn't going to extract as much as the alcohol would, which might be okay with you because it might extract enough when you get through all the fancy stuff, like all the different things to try to increase the extraction value. And you might say, well, this is good enough for the job I need to do. But I do want to encourage you that there are a bajillion other ways to work with herbs that are neither tea nor tincture.
Right.
There's so many other ways. And so you're not limited to, well, if it isn't tea, it has to be tincture, but I don't do alcohol, so it must be a glycerate. Oh, well, glycerates aren't very good, but it's all I can have. Heck no. There's so many other things that you can have. So don't put up with less potent extraction.
Yeah. And other things there might include, well, just take the powdered herb and stir it in some water and slug it back. That can be really potent, right? Or
might not be very appealing.
Yeah, it might not be the most appealing, right? Or let's make an electuary, right? Powdered herb mixed with honey into a paste. We can take that as a dose. That's like portable to almost the same extent as a tincture. It's on demand in the same way as a tincture is, but doesn't have the alcohol concern at all. Don't have to worry about glycerin or whatever. So again, lots of different options. As always, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and how you're going to go about doing that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next segment in here is kind of personal questions, not like what's your favorite color, but pretty close actually.
Purple, actually, it's purple.
couldn't have guessed, never would have known. But questions about stuff that we like and preferences and that kind of thing. So Hillary wrote in and said, what do you feel is one of the most valuable teachings you've received from a human, and who are they, that you most often pass on to others in your life? Hillary also specified it doesn't have to be an herbal teaching and that the human doesn't have to be living or met us in person. I appreciate that, actually, both. So thanks for that one. It's probably something a lot of other herbalists would include here, but the whole Asclepius thing, first the word, then the herb, last the knife. It's one of the first bits of wisdom that you passed on to a group of students that I was learning with. And it sticks. It sticks for a reason. It's a classic for a reason. Right?
I really like that the word comes before even herbs, right? Because humans need each other, and sometimes we need to talk about it. And also, you can't figure out what herb you're gonna help somebody with until you talk to them. And also, what if it isn't even an herb that they need? What if it is some other thing that they need? Like, if you skip that step, if you skip the word, then you're just like an automaton just dispensing,
Yeah. But it's helpful because it kind of implies more than it says, right? It implies that there's a scale of interventions, that you don't start with the most intense thing. And that can be like, you could expand it and look just at the herb in the middle term, and you could say, okay, so this also means don't start with the most intense, powerful, exotic, expensive herb that you can find. Start with something that is gentler. But I would say also, don't just think of this on a scale of power. Think about some other scales as well. Think about accessibility, for one, right? If there's an herb that's amazing, but is difficult to get, to find, to even know where to source it from, to feel trustworthy about your sources. Yes, I'm looking at you, Blue Lotus. or other aspects like that. Let's choose something that's readily accessible. What about familiarity? Like, there's a benefit to working with herbs that people already know. It's not less helpful herbalism because it's already familiar. It might be way more helpful, right? Especially if the familiarity means they're more willing to consume that every day. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that are built into that little comment.
I mean, also last the knife. Like, that's also important. You know, it's not never appropriate to take some heroic intervention kind of action. It's not never appropriate to have surgery. It's not never appropriate to, you know, whatever we're going to put under the word knife, right? Like, of course, Hippocrates didn't have pharmaceuticals to consider them, but like we do. And so, like, those kind of last resort therapies are also not never appropriate. Just that we're maybe not going to start there.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because I think that a lot of modern like herbalism / natural minded stuff kind of gets really down on like surgery or pharmaceuticals or whatever. But remember that surgery is not modern. The way that we do surgery today is much improved than the way they did surgery a couple thousand years ago.
Yeah.
But surgery itself is not modern. And there's no reason to like vilify a pharmaceutical or a surgical intervention or some other kind of thing when that's appropriate. Like, it's appropriate to do those things sometimes. And it has throughout human history been appropriate to do those things sometimes. And also, it's done inappropriately sometimes. And so I really appreciate that, like, the whole spectrum is here. But both like a philosophy of care and also a teaching on like what is even the definition of care. Like, oh yeah, no, the definition of care also includes those things and we should not be ruling that out. But also we're herbalists, so that's not our job to do, you know? Yeah.
Right, yeah, very nice. Okay, so slightly more modern. From the herbalist and teacher Paul Bergner comes the motto, support the resistance. Support the resistance.
Which he did not invent, but support the resistance in the frame of...
In the framework of...
Holistic health, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because, you know...
Right, so this is deployed in the context of you're offering suggestions to somebody, you're coming up with an herbal and holistic, intervention plan, and then they start to put up some hesitancy, some walls, some rejection of things that you're offering. And so kind of like some of the things we discussed earlier in this video or in this discussion, that doesn't mean that you just push harder, right? Mm-hmm. That you just say like, well, now I just have to convince you that this thing is definitely worth trying, that this herb is absolutely the thing that you need to take. I've got to make you do it, right? I've got to make you comply.
But I can embarrassingly remember some cringe times when I was much younger that I definitely tried that. I have definitely, like, I can remember, right? Okay, like if you've been in practice for a while, you probably can remember some too. But yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah.
It doesn't work. So support the resistance is a motto that we keep in mind because it's hard. Yeah. Because you're in the middle of being like, all right, we're going to do a complete overhaul of your diet so that we can reduce your sugar intake, and we're going to work with cinnamon and Tulsi tea to enhance that efficacy. And then they're like, I don't want to change my diet at all, actually. I came here for herbs. I heard you were an herbalist. And you're like, oh. But see, like the thing is that the diet change is really, really important in order to get the kind of benefits that you're hoping. And they're like, nope, I don't want to hear about it. So you have that, like, I want you to do this thing. I believe it'll work. It'll make the difference that you need. And you have to put that aside. Mm-hmm. And you have to say, this is what they're willing to do right now. That's my parameter. That's what I work within. Yeah. So this is an ongoing practice. This is something that we make a big part of the way that we teach our clinical mentorship students. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we have to remind ourselves about pretty frequently. So I think it's valuable in that sense.
Well, I have a couple also, but I don't know if they came from any particular person. But don't assume anything, always ask. I don't know, maybe I even just learned that the hard way, which doesn't qualify this question because this question wanted something from a human, but it is really important. Like, as soon as you assume something, well, okay, we can finish that statement, but it really is true. And I think that it is critically important for herbalists working with other people in your community or in clinical practice, because there can be matters where you feel like, especially if you're early in your practice, I don't want to ask that because then it'll look like I don't know what I'm doing.
Great example for this is, I see you're taking this drug. Was that prescribed for this reason? It may be that 99% of the time that drug is prescribed for that reason, right? For that disease, that condition, whatever. But it's not going to be 100% of the time.
No.
And for most drugs, actually for some drugs, okay, wait, hang on. Let me finish one sentence before I do another one. For most drugs, there are many off-label uses that the doctors will put them to. There are some drugs where the off-label uses that they were not put through the clinical trials for are now the number one reason that those drugs are dispensed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just like the category of drug that it's in doesn't tell you why this person is taking it.
Right.
Ask anyway. Even if you're like 80, 90% sure, ask anyway. Make it a habit.
But some people feel afraid to ask because what if they don't know? And then they're like, I can't let them know that I don't know. They won't have confidence in me. Ask every time. Never assume why somebody is taking a particular pharmaceutical, because you'll be wrong, you know?
And if they give you a funny look, you can just say, there's a lot of off-label applications for drugs. I just want to make sure. I understand that histamines are usually there for allergic responses, but hey, sometimes antihistamines are usually given to like quell down some allergic responses, but sometimes they're given because of heartburn and high stomach acid production. So I needed to check which one it was for you, right?
Right.
Okay.
And even if you can't make that justification, still don't feel embarrassed. Just say, hey, it's my policy not to assume anything so that I don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, you don't even have to have 10,000 specific justifications in your mind. Just don't assume anything and set that as a policy. And the same is true of conditions. Like, people will come to you with a diagnosis, but you cannot act on a diagnosis because you're an herbalist. And herbs don't work for diagnoses that's trying to bodge two systems together in a way that they don't fit very well. So even if you know what MS is or whatever, you still need to talk to this person about how it presents for them, because no two people have MS in the same exact way. Any diagnosis is a list of symptoms, and not every symptom has to be included to receive that diagnosis. And so, like, a subset of them will be included. So you have to find out, even if they are coming to you, I have this diagnosis, I want to work with herbs, you still have to ask, okay, but how does that present for you? And if you assume that you know what MS means, or fibromyalgia, or whatever it is, and you don't ask them what their experience is of it, then your entire protocol is going to be off. It's not going to be appropriate for their body because you didn't ask about what's going on in their body. And so, when you say don't assume anything, always ask, and then sometimes people push back and say, no, if I ask, they won't have confidence in me. They'll think I don't know what's going on. But the reality is, actually, if you ask, that's what should give them confidence in you. And if they say, well, don't you know? Then you can just say, well, everybody is different, and I am working with you specifically. I'm not working with some textbook definition of what you've come in here with. I want to be working personalized and customized to you. And let me tell you, but a client who starts off skeptical, but then you give them that explanation, they're like, oh my goodness, thank you. I want that too. Wow, great. And so just don't let your confidence get in the way, or lack of confidence, or thinking that it might not be appropriate or whatever else get in the way of asking every time, because it will make you a better herbalist. It will make your protocols work better. it's an invitation right off the bat for that client or person in the community to be collaborating with you, for you to be on equal footing with them. You're not sitting there over them like, I have the authority of all the knowledge. You are asking them to share their knowledge and their experiences. Like, there's every part of this is a win for everybody involved, unless you feel nervous about looking like you might not be confident. But I promise you that's not going to be the case. So, yeah, and I guess that just goes into my other thing, which is everybody is different, which is kind of the flip side of that. But it is really true. It's really true. I have never met two people who have the same thing in the same way in 25 years, whatever year I'm on now of practice. It doesn't matter how many people with MS I've seen, plus I also have MS. It doesn't make a difference. Every single one has been different. Everybody really is different. So, yeah, I think that's important.
This is something that you've learned from humans.
Yes, I have learned it from humans, but not one human.
Humans plural.
Yeah.
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 Right.
I think also maybe one other one that we heard first from Paul, but I think maybe it came from Cascade, was be a boring herbalist.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important too. Like, you don't need to be flashy. You don't need to have the trendiest new herb. What you need is to listen and ask the questions and listen again, and then collaborate on a solution that will work for them and that they can afford, and that, appeals to them and will do the job. And that work is boring. It's kind of boring. It's the same over and over and over again, but it's what works.
You need to be willing to talk to people about their diet. You need to be willing to explain ways that they can get more water into their body.
Oh my goodness.
You need to explain over and over again the importance of fiber and how to find that in the foods that they like, and how to get enough of that to do all the different functions that it performs for us. You need to be willing to discuss the different roles of cholesterol over and over again. And you need to be willing to create a little script about these things so that you can explain it repeatedly and in a way that's concise, but also information rich and motivational. And you're going to do it over and over.
And it is going to be boring. It is, but it is also going to work. Yeah. Anyway, you don't have to be out there on the bleeding edge of whatever is the most trendy thing today. I actually intentionally avoid whatever is the most trendy thing today, just because I'm like, no, I just don't want to. And I mean, that's just like my own little temper tantrum that I'm having. But you just don't need, it doesn't, like, you don't have to be the most expensive. You don't have to get the fanciest whatever. Like, none of that stuff is what matters. What matters is, did you help the person? And if calendula will do it for you, you don't need anything fancier than that. Yeah. I think actually Cascade Anderson Geller had a lot of really beautiful teachings. A lot of like really practical. She also said, she was visiting our school, and we had this giant pile of meditation cushions, and she was laying on it. And she was like, this is what I need, because I love to tell people to put the medicine in their belly button. Like, whenever they take a tincture, she used to like to, she's not living it anymore, but wow, what a wonderful woman. She used to like to tell people to take the tincture and then put some in their belly button. And she had this whole little whimsical story about why it had to also go in the belly button, and like the umbilical cord and nourishment and like all these things. But really it was because she wanted people to rest. It's like just this very delightful, a little bit mischievous, but
it's been a while since I put a squirt of tincture on my belly button. I should probably go do that after we're done filming here today. Yeah. It's very clever, and it's very Cascade.
Yeah. A lot of her speaking is available online, like when she gave workshops or spoke at conferences or whatever. And So you can find those, and also there's a book out of some of her collected teachings that her husband put together after her death, called A Lifetime of Herbal Wisdom.
It's just a few years old, really.
Yeah, the book? Yeah. So, what a lovely woman.
Yeah, check that stuff out. All right. Chrissy says, I would love to know your favorite herbal blends for tea. Maybe a heart-opening blend and an energizing or uplifting blend. What gets you going when you're feeling emotionally tired? It's a good question, because that happens for sure. I've got a couple of thoughts on this. If we're trying to tie all of those together, like open the heart, uplift, resolve emotional fatigue, that kind of thing, I would be thinking like cacao together with hawthorn and vanilla. And then maybe some ginger, or maybe calamus, or maybe kava, or maybe all of them together is what I would look for, right? So I think some of these you're probably like, yeah, of course, okay, cacao, because it's a bit stimulating, a little touch of caffeine, more theobromine in there. There's a pretty significant difference between the two of those and how they feel, how they affect you. So I think that's helpful there. But, cacao, ambrosia, theobroma, wonderful, friendly thing. Vanilla, not to be neglected as an herb. I think that it's one of those herbs that is like not given the respect it's due, because people use the word vanilla to mean boring. And come on, I mean, look at the flower, smell the thing, like open up one of those little tubes with one vanilla bean inside and open it and sniff. And like sometimes I'll just carry one of those around with me in my bag and have like on the spot vanilla aromatherapy. It's beautiful. It's delightful. It smells really, really good. Yeah. And vanilla is one of these exhilarant herbs that kind of lifts your heart, lifts your mood and your emotions. You never need a lot, but it goes a long way. And I really think it adds a lot to the formula. Mm-hmm. Of course, hawthorn is in there with that heart affinity, relaxing the heart, releasing tension that's impacting that. I'm prone to tension myself, so it's handy to have that in there. And then the warming herbs, the ginger, calamus, or kava, like what do they all have in common, right? They're warming and they're relaxant. Varying degrees of drying, numbing, bitter, whatever else, but really that like warmth and relaxation is what I'm aiming at in that inclusion. Yeah. And then I also really like, I guess I'm on a cacao, trip here today, but if I really just need to get myself going, I'm probably going to go ahead and make a good strong drinking chocolate. And then also infuse some black tea into there.
Yeah, you like to make your drinking chocolate with just water, not anything else in there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that with black tea.
Yeah, that is like
been a big thing for you lately.
Time to be productive. Let's go. Yep, a little bit of a methylxanthine reunion. That's what we have going on with that. Yep.
Well, for me, if it's tea, it's a lot of lymphatics. Because if I am feeling emotionally tired, then no surprise, my lymphatic system is sloughing off, which is what my lymphatic system is prone towards anyway. I'm like constitutionally, I'm like cold and damp and prone to stagnation. So, I am always drinking a lot of lymphatics. My favorites are red clover and origeron and self-heal and heather, not necessarily in that order. It depends on the day.
Origeron is worth maybe saying a thing or two about fleabane, because it's not like one of the official herbs of the Western tradition, right? Like it's not a...
And yet there have been so many studies done on it. Well, okay, no, you're right. Most of those were actually done in China.
Yeah.
But this is not daisy fleabane. This is Canada fleabane. It's the one that kind of looks like a bottle brush or a horsetail, or some places they call it old man's beard.
But not Usnea, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But really, really effective in lymphatic movement, a lot of vulnerary action. When you taste it, it has a lot of crossover with goldenrod flavor-wise. Yeah. And hey, when the flavor is very similar, that means that the organic chemical constituents are also very similar, right? Because that's where that flavor is coming from. Yeah, that's a big favorite for me. And a lot of research being done on that with regard to blood clotting and also micro clotting. So that I think is just like such a relevant herb in the well, you can't really say the post-COVID world, but we're in the COVID world, you know.
The COVID enhanced world that we all live in now.
Yeah.
Hooray. New feature has been distributed.
Thanks for that update. I'd like to revert back. But it's also really excellent because arugula it grows everywhere and it grows profusely.
Yeah.
So
it's not so much a commercialized herb, at least in the places that we buy from, you know. But you can harvest a ton of it real fast, and it's easy to dry and everything. It's a good plant to get to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
and I mean, like in you, it makes a huge difference.
It does.
Like when you're kind of like slugging through the first part of the day, we prepare that for you. You drink a bunch, your fluids move around, and suddenly you're like, okay,
ready to do stuff.
I've got some stuff going on. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say like in combination with some kind of a mugwort blend, which usually has like damiana and pine, and like maybe like orange peel and a little bit of juniper, and then like one of those lymphatics, maybe a little goldenrod. And the mugwort there is really, like a lot of people think when you hear mugwort, people think about menstruation or whatever, even digestion. But in this case, I'm working with mugwort as a nervine, and really as a kind of prefrontal cortex stimulant, or in other words, like a rational mind stimulant.
Yeah.
And so when I am feeling emotionally tired, let me tell you, that is not my most rational self. And so mugwort is really helpful then. And then damiana has that relaxant action and also a very movement action. All these herbs actually are very movie. So yeah, I think those are probably my two teas that there's no set formula there, and it's true that like we don't really have set formulas. Like we change things all the time.
Yeah, like sometimes your mugwort thing is going to include some juniper berries as well, and kind of move in a gin flavor direction. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's what does it for you.
Yeah.
But you know, like these are. We kind of wanted to illustrate something like the thing that gets you going when you're emotionally tired isn't going to be the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Like the degree of direct stimulation that you prefer versus don't actually want or don't find helpful is going to vary between people. What you try to stimulate may not always be your nerves or your brain, right? It could also be fluid movement. It could be digestive movement, because that can get in the way of thinking clearly, right? And feeling calm. So yeah, these are some of our answers. On some days there's others. And for you, there could be a whole other pile as well.
Yeah.
But that's a place to start.
Yeah.
Okay. Alyssa asked if we have a favorite ally in the Lemiaceae family, and if so, why? Well, so we both have a compass of herbs tattooed on our arms. We got these for our wedding. It's by our powers combined. They help us figure out where we are. And on here, I do have sage. And sage is an important herb for me. It's one of the first herbs that I worked with in depth when I was starting to learn herbalism. We really advocate for things like herb of the week or herb of the month. Or you can split the difference and do herb of the fortnight. That's always fun.
Or you can be really dedicated and do herb of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you're talking.
Yeah.
But you know, when I was first learning herbalism, I didn't know a lot, including like that I have a pretty significant sensitivity to gluten and dairy. And so I had been and was coping with a lot of digestive problems. And sage was an herb that really blew my mind because of how significantly it changed my digestive function. Centauri was another one, but that's not in the mint family, so we'll leave that for another discussion. Right? But sage, it was like, hang on, suddenly I'm digesting fats really well, and I didn't even realize that I wasn't. But now it's like a really big change for me, you know? And so I'm very attached to sage for people who have trouble digesting fats. Like sage is right up there with burdock in that range of problem as far as I'm concerned.
I think for you it might be ahead of burdock even.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But sage is also a really fascinating plant, right? Because I think earlier we were talking about how you can make it hot and get that diaphoretic effect, or make it cold and get the diuretic effect. When you play with sage as tea versus tincture, then the flavor and the impact can be significantly different. Sage can be taken into food. It can be considered a digestive herb or a nervous system herb, or hey, both. Sage has a lot of really interesting effects as a nervine that we find to be very helpful and intriguing. I often like to include that into cognitive function blends. You know, maybe it's sage, rosemary, and tulsi. We're doing a little mint family cognitive support, reunion formulation there. So sage is a really good friend of mine. At the same time, I do have to admit that out of all of the mint family plants, I'd probably have to go with catnip. Because, you know what, on a physiological level, I more often need a relaxant than a tonifying herb. And so I love sage, but I shouldn't actually just drink it by the quart every day for long periods of time.
But you should definitely drink catnip
all day,
by
every
the quart
day.
every day.
All day, every day. Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, man, for me, I think it's betony, which also is on me. Because, I get stuck in my head a lot. And not just stuck in my head, like, because I'm thinking too much, but also stuck even out of my head for dissociative reasons. And that journey back into my head and then from my head into my body has been a long journey, but also, like, I think a really important one for my mental health. And that also was like, I just sort of thought everybody lived up here in a balloon above their body. Like, I didn't really realize that that was weird or bad or different for a lot of my life. And yeah, I think this is just a super important plant for our time, including the last couple decades in that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Living memory. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Alyssa also asked if we prefer to harvest roots in the spring or after the first frost in the fall. And I think we got to agree that it's the autumn.
Yeah, it's
the
fall.
autumn time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Spring is too unpredictable, and can you even dig? Is the ground even thaw? By the time it thaws, is it too...
This spring was weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, okay, it's warmed up, but then it froze again, and then it warmed up again, and then there was rain, and then it froze, and then it's warm, and now I'm digging. Is my root just going to be a pile of mush at this point? Like, what is even going to happen?
Yeah, no, it's fall for sure.
Yeah, a little more reliable. Natalie asked if we could, if they could go back and talk to their green herbalist selves, like year 1, year 2, what would they do differently, if anything at all, with regards to their education or methods of learning? So for me, when I read it, I thought, well, I was lucky because I had an excellent first herbalism teacher who had no flaws and gave me everything that I needed to do everything.
That's right.
That's right. However, at the time, it wasn't really usual to introduce herbal energetics to brand new students. When I had been decently trained and was ready to start working and teaching with you, that was one of the first changes we made to our curriculum together, was to put energetics right there at the beginning and everywhere else along the way.
Right. As we built our own school, that was, and we built the curriculum that we were using in our school. That was, I think, the most important thing to us, because nobody was teaching that way. And at that time, people still considered herbal energetics to be like esoteric and like something that maybe a very advanced herbalist might interest themselves with, but maybe also not. And I feel really excited that has really changed over time. Yeah. It was still considered pretty weird to teach it at the beginning level when we did that. But now I think that it is becoming fairly common to at least give some kind of discussion about herbal energetics, and I think that is really good. Yeah. And then I would just apply that same basic thought to safety considerations, contraindications, and herb-drug interactions, right? Which also, it turns out, is good to teach beginners. Right up at the front. I think that's actually important to do.
And so that's also something that we've folded into the way we teach as well. So
that also, a long time ago wasn't really necessary, because if you were working as an herbalist, the people you were working with probably weren't taking pharmaceuticals. But now most people, like, it's pretty rare to meet some, maybe we as practitioners don't, but then like nobody that you work with is taking nothing. And so it's like really a luxury when you get a client who's not taking anything and you're like, all the St. John's wort for you.
Right. Yeah, it's true, actually. When I have an opportunity, when St. John's wort really makes sense for them, which may not be about depression, right? It might be about like a gut vulnerary activity.
Usually
because it's an amazing herb for that, right? And so when I can, I'm like, yes, St. John's wort, bringing it out. Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah, so that's like, I think part of that is just a population change as well. But it's really critically important now to have good training in that.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's lots of things I wish I had done differently, but also I feel like if I had, I would be a different and probably not better herbalist.
This is kind of like if you could change something about your past where you suffered through a difficult period of life.
Or were embarrassed or were whatever.
You might want to, but also that's what made you who you are.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, right?
I think that looking back, like the thing that I struggled with the most as a student herbalist or early in my practice was that I am the type of person who feels super comfortable learning things in my brain. And like memorizing things, and that's very easy for me to do. And I did not feel as comfortable learning in my body. I didn't feel comfortable in my body at all, actually. And so that was a real struggle, and it was not comfortable and not awesome, but I am glad that I did it. And I wouldn't change it, even though it was very uncomfortable. But I think today I would say if you are a new herbalist or an old herbalist or whatever, and you're trying to memorize things and you're feeling a struggle, or you're feeling down on yourself because my brain just isn't what it used to be, or like any of that stuff, then just stop trying to memorize things and start trying to put things inside your body. Because once it's in your body, you don't have to memorize it. It's in your body. You will remember it. So yeah, that is not something I would do differently. Well, maybe I wish that it hadn't been such a struggle. I wish that it had been easier, or that I had started that way from the beginning. But it was important, and I think now it is like it's really the only way to learn this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Belladonna said, if we could teach a new herbalist just one herb, what would that be? And so in my thought on this, I came to ginger, because it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous, right? You can get it at the grocery store, corner shop, whatever. It's familiar to almost everybody. Ginger is a spice, ginger is a flavoring in food, ginger beer, ginger ale, whatever. It's inexpensive. You can get a pile of ginger for not very much. Good quality, right? And because it's what we call a polycrest herb, which is to say that it can help out with a lot of different problems. Ginger is not just for nausea. Ginger is for a variety of different kinds of digestive cold patterns and sluggishness and slow down, and also cramping problems, like cold or tense, because it can warm up the system and get things moving along, and it can enhance your digestive fire if that's slowing down, right? But ginger is also a circulatory herb, and it can increase blood movement and flow throughout all the extremities of your body. And ginger is also just a systematically warming plant for cold patterns and cold constitutions. Ginger is an anti-inflammatory agent as well, right? At least as good as turmeric. I will die.
Better.
Yeah, I fully believe this, right? So with all those things together, it's ubiquitous, familiar, inexpensive, polycrest, right? Those are all immensely valuable qualities. And any herb that carries them is a good one to start with, Could sneak in garlic here as well because it shares like all of those features, but it's also extremely powerful and its potency is unmistakable. And especially if there's a new herbalist who's like, oh, I think herbs are pretty good, but do they work? Garlic will tell you that it's doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you will not doubt it.
So I would say chamomile. Also ubiquitous, also inexpensive, also polycrest. Actually with many of the same sorts of actions as ginger, but it's not hot. And so people who run hot and can't be comfortable with ginger can work with chamomile. And so what I really actually mean is ginger chamomile, which is my favorite of anything.
So it's a little hyphenated single word phrase that you use very frequently.
Yeah, it's true. It's totally true.
Yeah, good friends. Diana asks us, what's the craziest herbal concoction you've ever made that then actually turned out to be really tasty and a keeper recipe? I never really found it crazy myself, but I do admit that combining calamus together with kava is a distinctive flavor experience. Because you've got like the kava with the tingly and the muddy and the sort of bitter and the pungent that it carries that's not like the other pungents that are out there, and you've got all that going on, and then the calamus has that like kind of like ginger except quite bitter, but not in the turmeric way, but again a little bit of a muddy situation is happening, and there's a lot happening there, but I really like it a lot. I will say that it goes even better if you take your calamus, kava, and bring in some friends like vanilla and cacao together. And like a little touch of honey can make its way into there. Now we're getting something that a slightly larger group of humans might be willing to drink. Yeah.
For me, it was calamus and rose. In our school, we have like Herb of the Year. And in 2025, I really wanted calamus and rose to be Herb of the Year, which I wanted from the perspective of their actions. But then because of that, I was really committed to finding a way to get calamus and rose into something that would taste good.
Right.
And so I made an elixir, and I made many versions of the elixir until I finally got it to where it actually tasted good. But it was worth the effort because the effects of calamus and rose together are awesome. And when I finally got the blend the way I wanted it, it also tasted really good.
So this was rose petals infused, like fresh rose petals infused into honey, mixed together with calamus tincture.
And a little smidge of rose water.
Right.
That was the key, because no matter what percentage of tincture to honey, like the calamus tincture to the rose petal honey, it just wasn't... It was wrong, like flavor-wise. It was just like, don't do that. That's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you write it down anywhere? Like what the proportions were? Do you remember if you're pouring into your bottle?
Do I ever write anything down?
No, you don't write stuff down, but you usually have like an image in your head. Was it like 60% tincture? And then...
I don't know, but when the bottle is in front of me, I can pour it.
Gotta know it in your body.
You gotta know it in your body. Like I know when to stop pouring.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right. Now, there were a number of questions that came in that were essentially, what herb can I take for this problem? Right? So kind of like a personal health question, or if it was turned in the direction of somebody else, like what can I give this person for their health problem? And these are not ones that we're going to answer directly. Not in the way that you might have been hoping. But don't worry, we've got a reason for it.
Yeah.
And we're about to tell you.
So, okay, whenever you go on the internet, you're going to find questions like this. What herb is good for edema? Or what is good for chronic constipation? Or how can I improve gallbladder symptoms, right? If you have ever been on the internet, you have seen these questions out there. And then you will see a lot of people offering answers to these questions, and often the answers are just like the name of an herb or the names of a few herbs with no further instructions, no context, just just the names of the herbs.
Yeah.
And because you can see this everywhere on the internet, it seems really normal.
Yep.
like, oh, this must be what I'm supposed to do to get some answers, right?
This is the way people answer questions. This is the kind of answer you need when you have a question like that.
This is like, if I want an answer, this must be the way to get the answer.
Yeah. Now, this might be happening inside of you, even if it's not at the most conscious forward level of your thinking, right? And so what we're trying to do here is not to say people are dumb and they go and they ask dumb questions and then they give dumb answers and then they dumbly think that they're dumbly smart. That's not what we're trying to say here, right? We're trying to become aware of a cognitive bias that almost all of us fall into.
Right.
And that the only way to get out of is to work hard to train yourself to not fall into over and over again.
Right.
Okay.
And so also, if we recognize that the reason we think this is the way to get answers is because we see this everywhere, then we understand, like, oh, that's why I think this is the way to do it. And why do we see it everywhere? Well, I think one of the reasons is because people need help and they don't know where to go to get help. So they just go anywhere, like anywhere I can ask a question to try to get some help. So people who need help should get the help, and that's going to be part of the answer here. But first I want to break down why this is a problem and why asking a question like, what herb should I take for my gallbladder symptom, is not going to get you what you need and might get you something that doesn't help at all, which is disappointing, or that causes more problems, which is worse than disappointing. And then how to get real good answers to your questions so that you actually can get the help that you need.
Right.
So if somebody says, how can I improve gallbladder symptoms? Your first thought as somebody who is studying herbalism might be, oh, they should take liver supporting herbs and they should take bitters. And even right now, as you're listening to this, you might be like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So if you see that somewhere, if you see this question somewhere in a Facebook group or whatever, you might actually post, you might try to answer it, and you might say burdock and dandelion root. And in fact, I am certain that if you go to whatever herbal Facebook group you belong to, which is hopefully 0, but it's probably more than 0, if you go to any of them, you will find exactly this question with exactly this answer somewhere in that group.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the problem. You're providing an answer without an understanding of what the symptoms actually are. So how can you know that burdock and dandelion will actually do anything for this person? And even if they are the perfect herbs for that person, just the words burdock and dandelion root, that's not enough information for the person to take action.
The words gallbladder symptoms aren't enough for you to answer this question, right? Which ones? Which ones do you have? Are you having spasmodic pain? Are you having difficulty digesting fats? Do you know that there's stones in there? Because that does rule out certain herbs you might want to recommend otherwise. Right. Like, we do not yet have the info that we need to proceed.
Right. So, okay, we don't have enough information. We say burdock and dandelion root. Well, should they get capsules? Should they take one a day? If they do, that won't have the same effect as a decoction that they had 3 to 4 cups of a day. And if they make a tincture, that'll have yet another different set of effects. And so even if burdock and dandelion root were the right herb for this person, even if you asked all the questions or whatever, that still isn't enough information for them to actually take any action.
Right. We file this under the motto, people do not consume the names of herbs, right? Like, naming an herb is one step, but naming a preparation method, a dose, a frequency, other considerations that go along with it, those are necessary steps. They have to come together.
Yeah. All right. So in order to really answer this question, we need more information. We need to know what very specifically are the actual symptoms. And then, once we have that, we need to give them very specific information about what we're suggesting, why we're suggesting it, what we think is going to happen, what they should expect as a result, and what they should watch for to say, oops, this was the wrong direction. If we don't do all of that, then we're not serving the person who needs help. We can really never know if the first suggestion is going to work because everybody is different. So if we haven't given them the information to evaluate for themselves that it is actually working in their body and not, causing some harm, but that we're going in the right direction, then they aren't going to be able to tell us if adjustments need to be made. And so all of that is super important. And now you might be thinking, yeah, I hear you on that second part, but the first part, what symptoms are they having? Well, they told you what symptoms they were having. They're having gallbladder symptoms. Let me share a story with you. I had a client about 20 years ago who came in with exactly the same question. What's good for gallbladder symptoms? She had just come from her primary care physician that morning, and she had experienced some pain the previous night, and her primary care physician said that she had to have her gallbladder removed because of that pain. Okay.
This is jumping to the knife.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's your first warning.
Yep. Okay. So, and we don't know for sure that the practitioner jumped to the knife. Maybe no, we do actually. That is what happened.
We do in this case.
In this particular case. Okay. So my first question for this client was, tell me about the pain you experienced last night. And she said she was up all night with really bad gut cramping, and it scared her because it wouldn't go away, and it was really severe, and it wasn't until about 3 or 4 a.m. that it calmed down and she was able to sleep. And she had never had pain like that before. Now, the primary care physician the primary care physician did not ask her anything about what she had eaten the previous night, but I did. She had been watching a football game with a bunch of friends, and she had eaten 20 peppermint patties, and not the big ones. She had had 20 of the big peppermint patties. She knew for certain that the number was 20 because we were all doing it, and mid-game they had to send somebody to the CVS on the corner to get more peppermint patties because they ran out. So she knew for absolute certain the number that she had eaten. For dinner, she had eaten a little bit of chicken and a little bit of broccoli before the game. She was in a rush and she had eaten some leftovers. And she did not eat what she said was any of the junk that the other folks were eating, cheese curls and stuff like that. She had one beer, and otherwise she drank soda. Now, this person had a history of IBS, and we had been working together on that, and it was under control with diet. She had a strong sensitivity to dairy products that when we removed that took care of a lot of the IBS symptoms. Okay, peppermint patties have milk in them. So 20 peppermint patties worth of milk, that absolutely would have been enough. I mean, even one spoonful would have been enough to trigger her symptoms, and we knew that. But she had never had a symptom like this before. She'd had IBS, but this was totally different for her. Well, the other thing about peppermint patties is that they have peppermint oil in them. And that's not a problem in a reasonable quantity, but by the time you have 20 of the full-size peppermint patties, that's enough peppermint oil that somebody could absolutely have cramping just being caused by the peppermint oil.
Yeah, you've got some tissues in the guts that are now excessively relaxed, and others that are trying to compensate in some way, and so you get these spasms and weird stuff going on.
Yeah. Okay, plus that's a lot of sugar. So 20 peppermint patties today have 520 grams of sugar in them, but shrinkflation is real, so it probably was actually a somewhat higher number 20 years ago. But regardless, we'll go with the today number, 520 grams of sugar in a 3 to 4 hour period. That much sugar alone is probably enough just to cause vomiting and gut cramping as well. The World Health Organization guidelines for added sugar consumption for a whole day is 25 grams for an adult. Obviously, most people have more than that, but 520 grams is drastically more than that. Plus,
it's 20 times that much, and it's in a compressed window of time. That's
right.
Yeah, that's a lot.
All right. So my feeling in this situation was, gee, I think the peppermint patties probably caused the gut cramping. That seemed logical to me based on all these factors. And since the gallbladder surgery wasn't scheduled yet, And since she could be sure to ask her doctor to do a second evaluation before actually having the surgery, just to be sure that the surgery was actually necessary, then my thinking was, let's give ourselves like a month and see if we can get things back to normal for her, get things back to baseline, get things stable. Now, as an herbalist, it is not legal, neither is it good for me to say, you should not have that surgery. That's not my job, and also that would be practicing medicine without a license, not legal. But also I don't want to do that because I don't really know if she should have that surgery or not. But what I can do as an herbalist, legally and also appropriately, is to remind a client that they can ask for more testing or a second evaluation to double check before they take the action on a surgery, especially because the surgery wasn't even scheduled yet. So we talked a lot about that. We came up with a plan that she would have a nice soothing gut heal tea, herbal tea blend. If I remember correctly, it was calendula and chamomile and fennel. She had worked with a blend.
Maybe some peppermint, because we know she likes it.
No. We hadn't put peppermint in there. I know for certain because I was like, maybe we'll
leave that aside for now. You've had enough menthol for the next month.
Right. But we had worked with a blend very similar to that previously when we were first getting the IBS symptoms under control. So this was kind of like a return, a slightly modified version. And that she would eat really simple whole foods. A lot of broth and sticking to things like chicken and rice and simple vegetables that were cooked for at least the first few weeks, but hopefully a month. And also to stay strict on the avoidance of the foods that were triggers for her. Dairy was one of those. So that seemed to work. The symptom never did return. And she felt stable and like things were under control again. When she saw the doctor again, which was 6 or 8 weeks later, they did go ahead and schedule the gallbladder removal surgery. A month later, she came back. She had had the surgery, and she said they biopsied it and actually came back and told her, your gallbladder was fine. It was perfectly healthy. There were no stones and no signs of any problem. But now it was out, and you can't put it back in. Like, it's out, right?
Yeah.
So the point of this story is when you hear somebody say gallbladder symptoms, even if you are a medical doctor, you don't know what they're talking about until you ask. And if you don't ask any further questions and just start giving answers at that point, you're not going to give a good answer. Or if you're the person who's having gallbladder symptoms and you just say that and you are waiting for answers to come to you, they're not going to be good quality answers that will actually help you because people just don't have enough information to get what you need for you.
Yeah. So you do deserve some kind of an answer, right?
Yeah.
Or such an answer is achievable, right? Maybe we put it separate from dessert, but there are ways to get answers to this kind of question, but posting on a Facebook group and getting a one-word response back isn't going to do it, right? So it can take some time, it can take some extra effort, to figure out what's going on there, but it is possible to go through that, and it's also possible to do it without having an enormous outlay of money.
Right. So what you really need is a community herbalist or a clinical herbalist who is going to sit with you and talk to you about your body and your symptoms specifically and what you need and what will meet your goals. And you can do that. There are lots of places where you can do that for free and low cost. So our school has free clinic every month on the first Wednesday of the month. And we also have low cost student clinic sessions that are available 7 days a week. So there are also a few other schools that run free clinics and low-cost clinics as well. And some of them are online, some of them are in person. Ours is online. So my point here is that if you are out there with a health problem and you want to ask this kind of question, instead of just putting it in a Facebook group or somewhere, where you're not going to get an answer that will actually be tailored to your body and your needs, go to a free clinic. We'll put some links in for ours, and we'll see if we can gather some other ones for you too. Go to a free clinic and get real help. Let somebody go through your symptoms with you. Let them hear you explain how this feels in your body and what's really going on for you, so that they can create a plan together with you that's going to work for you and get you what you really need.
Yeah. But we are going to do a few examples of some of these questions, mainly to illustrate why we can't give it a single word answer, right? And if you have this kind of question, or if you are one of the people who sent in some of these kinds of questions, this isn't like to scold you, right? But to explain why like the internet at large can't just answer it for you, and to talk about some of the factors and some of the steps you're going to go through to try to figure this out for yourself, right? And we hope that to be helpful to you if you're like studying herbalism and trying to become a community herbalist, a clinical herbalist, so you can see how this plays out. Yeah. All right. So like the general theme though is going to be that these kinds of questions should generate more questions.
Yeah.
Right? That's the necessary first step. So as an example, somebody wrote in and said, hey, I'm trying to deal with brain fog that got worse following an infection with RSV, and I'd like some suggestions, right? So brain fog associated with RSV, give me some herbs. Hang on, wait. First, let's ask, was this RSV or was it COVID, right? And not in a way of like I interrogate you, but, oh, was that like, you got a lab test result back on it, you were sure that this was the kind of virus you were dealing with? That can make a difference in what we're going to do about it, right? Even if you were sure, I'm still curious about COVID, because how many rounds of COVID have you had, and how strongly we know COVID infection and reinfection correlates with brain fog, as well as a whole long list of other symptoms, right? So I'm definitely going to want to know about your health history in that sense. But either way, we do have to get past the label brain fog and ask more about the manifestation of it, right? So there's a sort of like classic brain fog that emotionally and mentally feels cold and damp and heavy, right? As if your mind is buried in mud. And so for that, maybe the first place to begin experimenting is going to be with warming and stimulating aromatics that have dispersive qualities to them. So are you thinking about rosemary already? Are you thinking about sage and tulsi? Wasn't that a little trio we talked about a minute ago? Right? Around like, getting things moving inside of your mind? Yeah. So there's that. But look, sometimes people call it brain fog when what they're experiencing is more hot, and they're distracted, and they're unsettled, and they're agitated, right? And in this case, I don't usually want to just cool down or like sedate the mind, but I do want to find a way to let off that steam, that internal pressure. And so I'm looking there at relaxing diaphoretic herbs like elderflower, lemon balm, maybe skullcap, right? Maybe peppermint even can make its way into there. Okay, but we've gone into pretty different directions in terms of what set of herbs we're going to look at or start with, based on not the name of the problem, but their description of what it feels like for them to cope with that.
And then the actions that we're trying to achieve. Like those herbs were just examples. We could list 10 more herbs in either case, but we're looking for those actions.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, wait though, because brain fog can be a symptom of lots of other things as well. Like, is this person having a reaction to food sensitivities? And the first thing they might say is, well, I don't have any food sensitivities. And that might have been true earlier in their life. But after a few rounds of COVID, after a round of RSV, after a car accident or any other stressful event in life, sometimes things that we used to get away with now cause inflammatory problems.
Right.
And so it's really important to do some investigating there, because if we just went and started with herbs, but they were reacting to a food that was common in their diet, then the herbs would never be able to keep up with the problem, because the problem is constantly coming in. It's not like that problem actually happened once because of a particular infection. It maybe the infection kicked off a sensitivity, but then that food is coming in every single day, creating new problems. Or maybe the RSV infection never was actually, maybe it was a red herring. Maybe it was never actually involved. Yeah. We don't really know till we just ask.
Right, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Okay. And look, sometimes the issue is that you're having a symptom and it's like triggered by a food sensitivity or some other area about the fundamentals of your life and your habits, right? So it could be that for this individual feeling brain fog symptoms, that the poor sleep they're getting is the biggest factor, right? And that's a case where it might feel counterintuitive if you just look at the name of the problem and then the herbs you end up recommending, because they're like, my brain is sluggish and slow, and you end up recommending wild lettuce and like skullcap and passion flower. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense unless you know that the poor sleep is the major reason for the brain fog. If we can improve the sleep, you can wake up and you can think more clearly for the whole day, right? So now my sleep herbs are my brain fog herbs, and it only makes sense when you see the connection and you can tell the story.
It could also be that, when we talk to this person, we find out that the brain fog really isn't as much of a problem in the mornings. It starts maybe around 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe 11, and then goes throughout the rest of the day. Well, the more that we talk to them, we find out that they work in an office with really poor circulation and that the carbon dioxide levels in there are really high. And then we say, okay, well, you know what, let's test that. And we get a carbon dioxide monitor, which they're easy to find and not even expensive these days, and take it to work. And holy cow, the carbon dioxide in the space where she works is like over 1,500. And yeah, of course, that's going to cause brain fog. And then by the end of the day, you get home. Okay, well, maybe you have better circulation in your house, but you're tired now because you've been tired all day. Those levels of carbon dioxide are really common, and they are enough to create similar impairment to a DUI, like the level of alcohol that would create a DUI. And so, like, it might be like there's nothing actually wrong with you. The problem is with the office. And so what we need to do is like get an HVAC contractor in there, or do sort of get permission to open the window, or like whatever.
Yeah.
And so just if we aren't looking into all the different parts of their life and finding all the different causes that could be, of course, overlapping, right? Maybe what if it's more than one of these different things, or other things that we didn't bring up yet? If we don't find those things, then we're just gonna be like, oh, Bacopa will fix the problem because it's trendy and everybody loves it right now for brain fog, but like it's not gonna help this person at all. They're going to go away and be like, well, herbs don't work. I tried it. They don't work. I think herbs are a hoax. Herbs are whatever. And also, they're not going to think much of you because that person isn't good at this. They couldn't help me. So all the way around, we want to get the person what they need, and we need to ask the questions to do that.
Yeah. Let's take another example. So somebody wrote in and they were asking about what herbs would be helpful for idiopathic edema, and talking about how, like, what do you do when you're all swollen up like a blimp, right? So there's a lot really just in that amount of what they gave to us, right? So idiopathic as a medical term, what it really means is we don't know, right? They can't figure out what the cause is, but that matters here because edema has a list of common causes. And so if you've been to the doctors and they ended up calling it idiopathic edema, that probably means, we do have to check, but it probably means that they've ruled out some of the most common reasons for it, like imbalance in your electrolyte intake or the amount of salt that your body's holding on to versus getting rid of, poor circulation overall, sluggish function of the kidneys and like their filtration rate and so on. So there are things that can be assessed and analyzed. And if that's been done, then that also has some consequences for us as herbalists, right? And the ways that we might want to leap to a response when we just hear edema. Oh yeah, we'll get you some diuretics right away, right?
And the thing is that, like, really kind of think about what that means. Like, the doctors don't know. And without asking any further questions, we're just going to give you an answer. But they've done testing and they can't figure it out. Like, okay, come on. We're going to need to ask some questions. Now listen, just because something can't be or hasn't yet been explained by the person's doctor does not mean that we can't figure it out with them.
It doesn't mean that they got a thorough investigation.
Right.
It could have been, well, we usually run this one lab test and we ran it and it's not the normal result for this, so something strange is happening here. I got to go to the next one.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
And sometimes it's true. Sometimes people get diagnoses that are just wrong. And, I don't want to be like poo-pooing on doctors or anything else, but I do want to say that they only have a short period of time with their patients. We have a long period of time with our clients. And so a lot of times the discussions that we can have with clients are not really available to the doctor. And so we can get information that helps us see a pattern or see like where this is originating, where a doctor might not simply have the time to do that.
Yeah.
And then after that discussion, one of the outcomes might be, we should take these thoughts to your doctor and say, hey, these are some things that we think you should know. Does this change your opinion about what's going on? Or some of the thoughts might be, oh, now I see some herbs that could be really helpful, or some other actions that could be really helpful.
Yeah. Another layer here, though. If just the name idiopathic edema doesn't tell us where in the body is this extra fluid stuck, right? Because that matters for us. Is it all over the entire body everywhere? Is it just down in your legs? Is it just in one joint, like one knee that you injured 10 years ago, right? Is it in one arm or in the torso of the body, right? Or whatever mixture it is, right? But each of these could have a different answer for us, right? If the edema is just in the torso, around the belly even, well, maybe that's just a response to some food that you're eating. And we're going to need to figure out some food sensitivities, and that's going to be the thing that's going to change the fluid retention for you, right? Or maybe they have edema in the legs, but it's really only in one leg and not the other one. And we're like, well, how did that happen, right?
I mean, sometimes that happens. That's not necessarily uncommon, but we still need to figure out why that happens. And one possibility, which is like sort of laughable if you said this to a doctor, but is absolutely real. If somebody sits at their desk with their legs crossed the same way all day, every day, you're going to damage the vasculature in that leg differently than in the other leg, right? And so over time, that absolutely is going to have an impact. And even though that is a ridiculous example, like seriously, you're probably out there thinking, Katja, that is really silly. You might be, but all the herbs in the world are not going to help this person until we realize, like, oh, we need to get you a different chair, or we need to get you standing up through the day, or we need to just not cross your legs, or like something, because the problem is still happening. So I think it's important, like, this is a place where a ridiculous answer like that really is plausible. And if you just like, no, I'm just going with this medical word and I'm just going to work with that, and you kind of rule out the reality that, like, actually it could even be something silly, which, I mean, it's silly when you say it, but it's not silly to that person because it's causing them pain and discomfort. Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to get enough details to provide an actual answer. It's going to take a little extra work, especially in a case where it seems to have already been figured out, or, put into that box of you're never going to figure out why that's happening. There's still work for us to do, right? Another common element when we encounter a question like this is the necessary involvement of non-herbal interventions, right? So for idiopathic edema, we might hear about it, we might ask some questions and be thinking herbal actions, right? Lymphatics, diuretics, stir up the fluids, drain away the excess, cool. But it's not actually time to think about the herbs yet. Because the different herbs work differently, for one thing, right? If somebody's having edema up in the chest after a mastectomy, the herbs, the preparation methods that I'm going to suggest there are going to be different from somebody with edema down in the legs, coming from 12 hours of sitting at work all day, every day, right? 7 days a week, they're always there, right?
Or coming from a cardiovascular problem or a kidney problem, or coming from complications of diabetes, which is going to include cardiovascular problems or kidney problems, or
totally,
right? Like, even just with that one, just in the legs, there can be multiple different,
yeah.
And then even if we think about the mastectomy, even before we think about which herbs, we have to be like, okay, well, what stage are we in post-mastectomy? And is it even safe to be working with herbs yet?
Yeah.
And has everything healed from the surgery enough that we can handle a stimulation in flow?
Right.
Right?
Right. And yet, like, alongside all of that, maybe even more important than this is going to be physical movement, right? Your muscles move the fluids through most of your body. If the muscles aren't moving, the fluids aren't going to go anywhere. And so if this person can walk, then that's where we're going to start, right? And we don't look at this as like, oh yeah, well, the herbs are really going to fix your problem, but walking would be good. It's closer to the reverse than that. The walking, the physical movement, the movement changes in your habits, right? Because this is going to include, like, don't be sitting in one position for 8 hours at a time, or standing in one position for 8 hours at a time if you work at a counter, right? We're going to want to build in movement breaks. We can be specific about things to do during your movement breaks to get movement in the particular spots where things are most stuck, right? A lot of times it happens that people who are really interested in herbs will try to do things with herbs alone that really do require or are magnificently enhanced by additional interventions around food, movement, sleep, stress mitigation, and sometimes community connection as well. And when those aspects aren't addressed, then the herbs can only do so much for you.
That's so, like, I think edema is such a really great example of that when we think about just pulling out movement. I mean, I could say this about sleep or any of the other stuff too, but we're just going to pull movement for a minute. The lymphatic system has no pump.
Yep.
Like, your circulatory system has a pump. And okay, your heart is not responsible for getting blood down to your toes. Your muscles help with that job. And okay, but still, there is still a pump. But your lymphatic system has no pump. The only way for lymphatic fluid to move is from muscular contraction. So if this person can't walk, that's okay. We can still work those muscles in some other way, like by some other kind of movement. But some kind of movement is gonna be required. Otherwise, like, all the lymphatic stimulants in the world, anything that we give, or any diuretic or anything else, we still can't move the fluid unless we're moving the muscles.
They can't do the job. The herbs and the holistic health habit interventions, they go together. They go together. Yeah. All right, well, a similar example, right? So somebody wrote in and said, what herbs can I take for severe long-term constipation, and I can take them on a daily basis? All right. So before we even think about herbs here, we've got some things to consider, right? And you can, like, hit pause and be like, well, what would I think of before herbs in that one, right?
And I mean, like, you probably already have thought in your head of a specific herb has already jumped to your head that you could be like, oh, I'll just say this. And so like the immediate thing to do is, when you hear an herb jumping into your mind, okay, we're not going to just, like, spit it out, like throw it out. We're also not going to spit it out to the person.
Right.
We're going to set it aside.
Yes.
It might be useful later, but we don't want, so we're not going to forget it, but we're also not going to latch onto it because there's other things to think about first.
Right. So we're going to ask about fluid intake, right? We're going to ask about fiber intake, about what kind of fats and oils they eat and how much and how often. And we're going to ask about movement habits, because all of those things are really huge factors in healthy and consistent and repeatable bowel movements. Yeah.
For that matter, we're going to ask about diet in general, because if their diet is 25% cheese, that poop is going nowhere.
That can be a huge factor for people.
That's a huge factor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, cheese is delicious, but even if this person was like, no, I don't have a dairy sensitivity, I'm fine with it. Whoa, that much cheese is still going to be constipating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we start with those, like, foundational habits, right? And then we can think about herbs, but we're not going to leap to herbs before we do a few more assessments, right? Or investigations. So constipation itself is generally some combination of tissue states in the intestines that are cold and or dry and or tense. And so warming or moistening or relaxant herbs are going to be helpful. And we can start with the ones that are most extreme, right? So for some people, their constipation is going to respond super well to ginger because it's warming and we've got a relaxant quality and that just fits the need and it does the job.
That's going to be a person who tends towards stagnation in other areas of their body as well. And also probably a person who runs cold and damp. Because that's like a classic stagnant pattern, right? Right. So heating them up and adding in mobility is, and in this case it's circulatory mobility for the most part, but we're also relaxing tension, and the tension can just come from like trying to hold on to all that stagnant stuff. So even if your body overall is lax, you still can have tension in just the intestines. So all of that in that kind of person is going to be way more effective. That warming action is going to be way more effective than something that was just an outright laxative. Right.
But if you have somebody who's constipated but super dry, then okay, increase the importance of more fluid intake for one thing, but also let's get them a demulcent herb like marshmallow, right? If we just throw ginger at them, and especially if we just throw it in the form of something hot and dry like a tincture, right? Then that may not help them very much. Like, yeah, ginger's going to try to move things and try to release tension, but if there's not enough lubrication, it's still not going to go very far, right? And so the marshmallow could be way more important and effective for that individual, right? Some people might respond really well to good, strong chamomile, right? We've got a little bitter influence coming through. We've got a good relaxant action coming through in there. Maybe there's also a nervous element of their constipation that the chamomile is helping to address. And so that could be the most helpful herb for them, right? All right. And then we can also admit that, yeah, there's always yellow dock, right? Or there's always coffee.
Two herbs that probably jumped right to your mind, right?
And those will give you a bowel movement, right? But we recognize in that they're not going to fix the root of the problem if those foundational elements aren't addressed. And if we don't ever consider constitution, and we don't ever consider their diets and their movement habits and so on, right?
Like if you're just traveling and you are bound up because that happens when you travel, there's no problem with just grabbing some yellow dock or some coffee and like, don't make it so complicated. Just take some and it'll be fine. Especially if you already know that works for you. But this person's talking about severe long-term constipation. Right. And yellow dock might simply not be enough. Might actually not touch it. I've known lots of people who have taken yellow dock and said, yeah, that didn't do anything for me. So, you know, if this is severe long-term chronic constipation, just grabbing some Cascara Sagrada is not a fantastic idea. Maybe sometimes as a one-off, right, in like an emergency kind of super discomfort situation, but that very quickly turns into not a one-off, you know?
Yeah. Too easy to slide down that way, right?
Yeah.
So, but just kind of think back over the course of the answer that we gave here, because we start with foundational interventions. And then we go on to energetic assessment of the tissue state in the particular area that's got a problem. We think about how to match appropriate herbs to them, right? Or we see those as experiments that help us to verify and identify this tissue state that's at play, right? You try the marshmallow and it doesn't really help. Okay, dryness wasn't a big driver there after all. Fine, information for us to move forward with, right? Okay, and then after that, we can think of direct, like symptomatic or palliative kind of a remedy, probably with a stronger, acute phase action to it. And we can be clear that this isn't about fixing the underlying issue. This is about immediate relief. Yeah. Okay. You see the pattern there? I trust you. So this just brings us right back to where we started, however many hours ago that was, right? With the themes about uncertainty and experimentation, right? From the very first question. This is the process that we go through. This is the only way to really identify what helps, what's going on, what we're going to do about it, and what we're going to try next, right? Until that's accomplished, we remain in the less helpful form of uncertainty. Right? We need to do some experiments to test out our hypotheses, provide data, generate new ones, and we can go forward from there, right? And this applies to whatever kind of question we've got, including ones that are like there is no way to actually answer them straight. So like one person wrote in and said, every time I take turmeric or even touch it or apply it to somebody else, I get bladder spasms. What's going on? And I'm sure that they were hoping for us to be like, oh yeah, I see it all the time. It's a specific thing, right? But I don't have a straight answer for that, right? We do have some questions that might help you to figure it out, including, okay, you react really strongly to turmeric. Do you react that strongly to isolated curcumin? Right? What would happen if we took a single chemical supplement version and tried that? I don't know yet. I'm not sure, right? But it would be interesting to see. It would be one way to narrow down what you're observing. Maybe a better way, actually, would be to look in the family and say, have you had any reaction anywhere like that to ginger? Pretty similar to turmeric. Okay, it doesn't contain curcuminoids. If that's the difference, maybe those guys are the culprit. Okay, or other members of the Zingiberaceae family, cardamom, galangal, the grains of paradise, korarima, like any of these different members, do they also set off that reaction for you? Could be some kind of a family intolerance or allergy that you've got going on, right?
It's also worth asking about the bladder spasms themselves,
right?
Because what if it doesn't have anything to do with turmeric? What if turmeric is like an innocent bystander who just happens to be there when this is happening? What other times does this person get bladder spasms? Could this person actually have interstitial cystitis or a chronic UTI, and they have like made this association in their mind with the turmeric, but it's actually not the right association, and so they're like suffering with this like bladder problem that isn't being dealt with because they've associated it with turmeric? Like, maybe not. Maybe turmeric really is the cause, but we don't know until we get really curious and start asking all these different questions to figure out all the different possible sources of input that could be at play here.
Yeah. All right. And then for the person who wrote in asking if slippery elm was a good remedy for acid reflux, my question in response is, what does a good remedy do? Right? Because slippery elm will, very reliably, relieve the burning sensation when you have an active flare-up of heartburn, right? And it will soothe irritated mucosa in your throat and in your stomach, and that's good. That's good. It's palliative. But if you're looking for something that will quote-unquote cure your acid reflux, then slippery elm may not accomplish that, because your acid reflux could be due to a lot of pressure inside of your abdomen, and maybe that's coming from dysbiosis that's causing bloating in response to some of the food that you eat. Or maybe that's coming because of your alignment and your posture and the chairs that you sit in that kind of cause you to crunch your belly inside, and that makes a lot of pressure in there that wants to push up against your stomach and against the lower esophageal sphincter, and now that's a big contributor to your heartburn, right? Slippery elm won't change those habits, those food elements, those responses to the way that you sit and move. And so is it a good remedy? I'm not sure. You have to answer that, right? If your reflux is coming from stress, if it's coming from a food intolerance, et cetera, we need more information. And we need to do some experiments before we're going to figure out if this is the right thing for you. Yeah.
And also we need to know, like, what do you actually want? Like, I think that's a really important part of what does a good remedy do. Like, what result are you looking for? And if you're looking for, oh, I don't want to ever have to think about this again, okay, well, no. But if you're looking for, this doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while it happens, and I just need something to soothe it in that moment. Oh, well, okay, actually, probably.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
All right, well, that was all quite a ramble, right? You might be over there thinking, like, come on, what's the harm in just saying, sure, slippery elm will probably be great, or suggesting some lymphatic stimulants or whatever, because, hey, it'll probably help anyway, right? It might. Every herbalist has plenty of stories of, I gave them the first herb that came to mind, and it really, really helped a lot, and then they were, like, super thrilled. And that's a nice day to have as a practitioner. But it won't be every one of your days. No. And also, that story doesn't always have a happy ending. Sometimes that story has, oops, and I made it way worse, right? Yeah. And so then there's the one in the middle. What if it does nothing? Well, okay, now that person says I tried herbs and they didn't work. right?
Yeah.
And that person now, like, isn't helped, isn't served at all. So on one hand, yes, herbalism is the people's medicine. It is available to anyone. It certainly is way more accessible than many other types of options, but it doesn't mean that we as herbalists don't need training. We need a lot of training. And for the person on the other side of the table, right, they can't just ask a question and get like a Pez dispenser answer that will just solve all the problems. There has to be a dialogue. There has to be a consultation with collaboration in order to find the thing that will actually help them. The thing that will help them is out there. The thing that will help them may be multiple things that we stack next to each other to get a cumulative improvement that we're happy with, right? It may not be one thing. It might be multiple things. Actually, it's almost always multiple things. But we're not going to be able to figure that out without the discussion, without the conversation, without the uncertainty that builds curiosity that helps us to come up with the right answer for this particular person in their own body that is different than everybody else's body.
And that answer is not going to be the name of an herb, right? And so don't accept that in a clinical context. Don't accept that in a social media herbal discussion group context. It's not a helpful answer anywhere, right? Be digging for the rest of the details, the rest of the protocol, the rest of the formula, the rest of the story.
And really, like, I think this is also a call to action for people to be seeking out their local community herbalists and clinical herbalists, and seeking out those free options. If you are like with budget constraints, there are free options. There are low cost options. They are available. We have openings every single day. And so if you're out there saying, I can't find one, we can hook you up. But I think that as an herbal community, if we are recognizing that the like simple answer, I have this problem, what's my answer, that really doesn't work for people, then, and especially a lot of people have had that experience already in the medical world, and it didn't work for them. And now they're coming to the herbal world. And if we just replicate that same experience, we're not serving them. So really, that we as students and practitioners and people as seekers of assistance, if we are all pushing for more, not the one-word answer, not the simple off-the-cuff answer, but really personalized, collaborative kind of care, then everybody is going to be better served, lifted up. It's going to cause herbalists to seek skill development, to be constantly learning and constantly developing their craft, which is how you don't be bored. And like it's good for everybody. Yay. Sorry, I realize that I sound like I have pom-poms going on here, but I also feel really strongly about it. So
rah, 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 come on.
If you feel really strongly about it, if you're over there with your pom-poms and you're like, yes, Katja, I feel that way too, then we belong together. And you should come and study with us because we would love that. Yeah.
So remember, you can find us at CommonWealthHerbs.com, and we have courses for you. Whoever you are, whatever level you're at, whether you're a brand new beginner and this is all kind of blowing your mind in 6 directions, or you're somebody who's been at this for a while and we've been blowing your mind in 3 directions you didn't realize were there. Yep.
Yes. So again, that is CommonWealthHerbs.com. And you are welcome to email us anytime. You'll find our email address there. It's info@CommonWealthHerbs.com. Ask us anything. We are happy to help. We've got free courses. We've got low-cost courses. We've got free clinic. We've got low-cost clinic. We have a million ways for you to get in touch with us and see if we have something that you want. So please do.
And if you listen to the end, then you're probably going to enjoy learning with us in other ways as well as this episode.
Yeah, this was long. Sorry. Unless you loved it, in which case you're welcome.
You're welcome. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.